All right, so hello, good afternoon. My name is Councillor Alyssa Swingless and I'm the Chair of the Nutrient Management Board, and we're going to just go around and introduce the members of the board for the benefit of Michael Carr, who we're welcoming today, who's going to be looking after the board administratively. So if I can start with who we got here. Claire, do you have Claire Manette? No. Sid Phelps.
Hello everyone,
Councillor
Sid Phelps from Forestine District Environment Portfolio. Thank you.
Thanks. And David Lee. Got David from Natural Resources Wales, yeah. Fergus O'Brien.
Fergus O'Brien, Welsh Water and Wastewater Environment Services Manager.
Hi Fergus. I know Grace has given her apologies, she's not feeling well. Helen Dale from CLA. Helen, is she on the call yet? No. Helen Stace from Herefordshire Wildlife Trust. Is Helen coming still? Is Andrew here for her? Nobody here from.
I don't think Helen's coming.
I don't think Helen's coming. I have a feeling that Andrew was going to come. Well, we'll wait and see. Do we have anyone from Brecon Beacons National Park? Because I understand that sadly James Marsden has stepped down. We don't have a replacement person there yet. No, okay. And I just want to record now my personal sadness that James has stepped down. His contributions to the board have always been very worthwhile, well informed, and welcome. So, but I'm glad he's still here. So, hi, James. Jenny Gamble. There's Jenny.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm not a board member as such. I was chair of TAG, the Technical Advisory Group, until a couple of months ago, and that's now passed over for a bit to Natural England. But yeah, my role in this so far has largely been sort of on behalf of the Technical Advisory Group.
That's great. Thanks, Jenny. You may have to sort of pick up a bit because of Grace not being well and not being here, if that's okay.
Yeah, and anything that I can't answer EA-wise, and because Grace is unavailable, I'll take back and I can speak to Grace afterwards. That's
fine. That's great. Thanks a lot. Phil Crossland.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Phil Crossland. I'm Interim Service Director for Highways, Environment and Waste at Herefordshire Council.
Thank you. And Martin Williams, birthday boy.
I am Martin, birthday boy with a piece of sandwich in his mouth, representing NFU, and I'm a farmer from Fountain.
Thanks, Martin. Mary Albright.
I'm the co-chair with Jim Hicks of the Herefordshire Construction Industry Lobby Group.
Thank you. Simon Evans.
I'm Simon Evans. I'm the CEO of the YNS Foundation, and I'm testing negative for COVID for the first time for 2 weeks.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. Yeah, sorry. Have you been okay? You all right? Good. Craig O'Connor, Monmouthshire. Have somebody on the call from Monmouthshire? No. Peter Morris.
Afternoon, or yes, I'm Peter Morris, professional lead for planning for Powys County Council. Hello.
Thanks, Peter. Anne Weedy, got your hand up. Is that because you're not David Lee?
No, that's correct. I'm not David Lee. So good. Yeah, good afternoon. Anne Weedy. I'm the operations manager for Mid Wales from Natural Resources Wales.
Okay, is David going to come on the call?
David's away on holiday this week, so yeah, he sends his apologies.
All right. Okay, that's brilliant. Thanks a lot, Anne. Okay, so that's another apology as well then from David Lee.
Melissa, it's Joanna Redgewell. Sorry, I was on mute when I was trying to talk. Standing in for Claire Manette from Natural England.
That's great, thank you. So welcome to everyone. Yeah, so the meeting's being recorded, will be uploaded to the YouTube channel. As usual, we do have chat facilities. Please don't use it as a running commentary. And it would be helpful, just while Michael's sort of bedding in, if you could introduce yourself when you come to speak, that would be really, really great. Thank you. So right, without further ado, on with the agenda. Notes and matters arising from the last time. Has anybody got any comments on notes from the last meeting. I've got a couple of things. Joanna, Claire was going to check about if tributaries are covered by IRZ. Obviously she's not here, but that's a kind of still a little bit of an outstanding query there. If you could take that away, that would be awesome. A couple of things that Grace was going to come back on, but I've spoken to her on the phone. She's aware of it. She will come back when she's able to attend. Fergus, you were going to look on the, I'm curious about the quantities of biosolids sourced both from Welsh Water and Severn Trent and indeed any other water company coming into the catchment. And do we have a sense of the quantities there? You were going to have a look into that. You're on mute, Fergus. You're still on mute. There we go.
Apologies, Chair. I was supposed to do that. I haven't had a chance to sort of follow that up yet. I will do and follow up quickly on that.
That would be good. And is it possible for you to kind of look at other sources, you know, so Welsh Water, Severn Trent, anyone else that might be bringing into the catchment?
I can ask my colleagues on the biosolid sides to have that conversation with their sort of counterparts in Severn Trent.
Fabulous. That'd be really, really helpful. Thanks. Thanks, Fergus. Mary?
Just to say, I think Kate was doing something about that with the Welsh Water Biosolids team, and also Refocus have captured it within their report.
Have they captured it from other, like Severn Trent and other companies? Because that's what I'm not sure about.
They gave a percentage. I think it's 3%.
There was a number that was banded around during the Refocus presentation of 23,000 tonnes annually.
23,000 tonnes.
But don't hold me to that. Fergus probably knows more than that. At one time out of Ain, it was 18,000 tonnes a year produced. It's been shut down because, well, Ain doesn't work very well. As far as I'm aware, it's still not working brilliantly, and it comes from Cardiff. That's my understanding of it.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. So, I mean, I really would like to get some finite bottom line on all that, if that's possible. Thanks. And then the other thing that was raised is this, with the kind of question marks around the numbers of chickens, or and indeed your uncle might broaden out to intensive livestock within the catchment. That it seems to be really, really difficult to get this to any certainty. So there was a request from the board for our board members to work with those voluntary members of the public who are doing a lot of work here to assist them in getting to the bottom of it all. I've had an update from Alison Caffin, who has reported that she'd contacted Herefordshire Council and the Environment Agency, hadn't had a reply, and then so she undertook the process in obtaining cross-referencing environmental permits. And the upshot of that was that it revealed an underestimation in her earlier numbers of an additional 750,000 birds. So her revised totals are 17.75 million birds in Herefordshire, 16.75 in the catchment in Herefordshire. And extrapolating from that, she estimated there are an additional 1 million birds overall. And I'm obliged to Jenny Gamble, who this morning emailed a kind of that she'd read that, and because she's only just come back into work, and that yes, that was broadly in agreement with the work that she had done, but she'd missed the earlier correspondence. So that's something. And Alison Kaplan has asked if our colleagues from Monmouthshire and Forest of Dean could look at the numbers from their own planning authorities and bring them along next time. Christine Hugh-Jones has been in contact with Stuart Neal, who's the Welsh Government statistician, to understand the methodology and reliability of their data sets, but there still seem to be quite significant discrepancies in that area. So I think that's something that we probably still need to work on or get an explanation of.
Is that broiler and free range?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it just sort of, you know, trying to triangulate different. So there doesn't seem to be a single place where this knowledge is. So you're trying to sort of drag it in from all different directions and join it up in a way that makes that we can all agree. And we haven't got there yet, I think. So why does that matter? I mean, one thing that struck me, and I'm grateful to Mary and Sarah Bell for this, was the phosphate from one person is equivalent to the phosphate of 4 chickens, as it were. So if you have a kind of give or take of 750,000 chickens, that, you know, that's the equivalent of a town, or quite a big town, in fact. You know, so if we take, for instance, the recently approved one, Hellog, 90,000 bird expansion, it's equivalent to 20,000 people. This is like, so, you know, we have got to kind of bear in mind the impact of this, and it's not good enough to just go, well, it might be plus or it might be minus. We really need to try and get it as close as we can to something that we can all agree. And with that in mind, can I ask the board here and now for an agreement? Because one thing we haven't done is push DEFRA on the annual inventory numbers. And, you know, I think we should ask for that. We've asked for the APHA numbers, and I'm not sure if we've got them yet, but I know we've asked. So that's where I'm at. Is everyone's okay with that? Awesome. Councillor Sid Phelps.
Yeah, just of course, I mean, they should have those figures, or even the EA should have those figures for the intensive poultry units. I mean, shouldn't they?
Whether there's an environmental permit, there's a lot that don't have environmental permits that just drop below the 40,000 bird.
Oh yeah, of course.
Permitting limit. So it's not quite, yeah. Oh, if only it was that simple.
Sorry, I forgot about the threshold. But also for figures from Forestine District, of course, I'll try and find them. If they might be difficult to find, but I'll try and find them. But I guess obviously we don't want the figures for the whole district. We want the figures from the wide catchment within our district, which is probably less than a third of the district. So that makes sense. I think it's probably go back over the planning, ask your planning team to have a look, or that was the likely route. I think that's what's been happening mainly so far, is going back over planning applications. Okay, good. And anyone got any further comment on that, Mary?
Just to say that the numbers obviously are relevant, because for every action that we bring forward and pay for as a solution, it could easily be subsumed and obliterated by a planning approval. So it's not just the numbers of people, because obviously Herefordshire and Powys and Monmouth, they're fairly sparsely populated. So there is a significance to the numbers equating to people and phosphate generation, but there's no point us paying for wetlands or Welsh water upgrading, Irongate, or whatever it is, if we have one application that obliterates the benefit.
Yeah.
So we're chasing our own tails.
Well, so if we take one Hellog, which is only an expansion, it's not a new thing. That's equivalent to, roughly speaking, of 2 Ross and Wise.
Yes. But in wetland terms, Rachel will know the numbers, but say that covers 600 homes. You know, you're talking a tiny percentage of betterment being swallowed by one planning application. So we'll never get anywhere. We're still going backwards, not even standing still. And we need to.
Well, I think it's important that we try to at least know where we are.
Oh yeah, no, I agree. I think the numbers are important, because they're also tangible for other people to understand why we have these 3-hour meetings every 3 months.
There's that.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mary. Okay, all right. Any more on that? Okay, any more on the notes of matters arising? Are we happy to agree those notes? Yep. Okay, so an update from the TAG and steps to producing future River Wye nutrient management plan performance reports. Joanna, are you going to start here, or Hayley?
I'm happy to start, if that's
Hayley.
all right.
All right, Hayley. Good,
Colin.
thank you. Thank you and
I'll
welcome.
just introduce myself, because I've not been before. So I'm Hayley.
Thank you.
I'm Hayley Fleming from Natural England. I'm a senior advisor in the planning team, and I've recently picked up chairing the TAG, the technical advisory group, from Jenny Gamble, who's also on the call. So the main thing to do really is to introduce myself. We had an initial TAG meeting last week where we focused on how how to make the tag work a bit harder for us. And it was a really good, frank discussion. The biggest barrier by consensus from everybody really to the tags work has been getting the right people with the right knowledge to attend and also to be able to resource this work area. So we discussed ways we might combat that. We're going to have tag meetings about every 6 weeks. So it's 2 tag meetings for every 1 board meeting. We're going to set the dates in advance, which I've done, and have the agendas set out in advance. So it's going to be a bit more mandatory. So we're really expecting all of the organisations to field someone for the tag and make sure that it's the right person with the right knowledge to make that more of a doing kind of a meeting rather than reporting. In addition, one of the ways that we're going to try and push this work forward is by having subgroups. So at the moment, we've got the action plan, the phosphate action plan, which I think we'll all, it's quite clear is full of a lot of gaps. So we really need to start trying to fill some of those gaps with actions. The idea is that we'll have subgroups that can meet very frequently over a short period of time to really try and push forward on whatever work needs to happen to fill one of those gaps. And they'll bring recommendations and requests to the board. So, for example, one of the action plan subgroups that we've already got up and running is one to look at land use actions on the LUG. And we've got another meeting of that group on Monday. And we're setting up other groups to look at poultry and wetlands. We're also talking about better monitoring and reporting and whether we can do something more with the existing dashboard, which gets updated annually at the moment, to make progress on the actions that are in the action plan easier for you guys and whoever else needs to be able to access what's going on with different work streams. So I'm in the middle of conversations with Herefordshire Council and the Environment Agency about how we might approach that subject of reporting. So that's the main part of my report. The next full tag meeting's on the 29th of April.
Thanks, Hayley, and thanks for the report that you sent, because it was great to see that kind of sense of purpose. It was so good and welcome, and thank you for coming along here. Has anyone got any comments or questions for Hayley? Simon.
Hi, Hayley.
Hi, Simon.
WAF has been suggesting actions for the tag for some time now. The first draft I saw was the beginning of 2021, which were costed up and detailed, and they don't seem to have gone into the tag process. And I'm trying to work out, they don't seem to have gone into the NMP. And I'm just trying to work out where the block is here.
Yeah, there's 2 spreadsheets that I'm going to do a bit of work tomorrow to amalgamate. One's WWF's spreadsheet of possible actions and projects. That's the one with the green wash. That might be the one you're referring to, actually. Yeah, I think it was produced last summer as a list of projects and that would be taken to MPs and DEFRA. And actually, Joanna, my manager, might know a bit more about what happened with that. The main one we were keen to push was a project officer. And obviously that's not happened. The other spreadsheet is more of a list of practical type actions, particularly around agriculture. So tomorrow I'm going to put those 2 things together so that I can bring it back to the next tag meeting and we can start to do some sort of prioritization exercise. And I'm hoping that that will give rise to some of the recommendations and requests that come up to board. So is there a specific piece of work that we need someone to undertake? Do we need resource for that? Do we need money for that? Those are the kinds of things that I think hopefully will become more of a direct connection between what TAG is doing and what we're bringing up to the board and what the board are equally asking the TAG to do, if that makes sense.
Sorry, could I just come back on that quickly? Just reading the NMP as it is, there's an awful lot of uncertainty within it, and I feel that if the issue is that information has not been that information is going to be included within the NMP, that will tidy up some of the uncertainty. But is there a case of simply taking this in bite-sized chunks and every tag trying to firm up 2 or 3 of the things that are uncertain and then reporting back to the board on those and building a proper plan that way?
Yeah, so that's essentially what I'm hoping to do by having these subgroups that can really get into an issue, and they need to be properly programmed into a work program that takes its lead from where the gaps are in that action plan. So I'm in the process of trying to make the tag, make the agendas a bit more available up front and tie it all in together so that there's a logical flow of, we've got this problem, it's identified in the action plan, let's set up a subgroup to look at it. That subgroup reports to the tag, who then come up to the nutrient management plan board. We've got a reporting process, and at the end of it, hopefully there's some resolutions that can be put back into the action plan to plug that gap.
Excuse me for asking, would it be possible, or do we already, and I've missed it, have any detail on what goes on at TAG? If you're not a member of TAG, do we get the minutes of that? Do we get what goes on there? Because I haven't got a clue what's going on at TAG. I don't know what Simon's proposed. I don't know what was discussed last time. It just seems a bit odd that we don't have.
I don't actually know the answer, I'm afraid, whether the board normally get the TAG minutes.
I mean, it'd be handy even if we've been
We
there,
get an update. So
okay,
yeah.
Could we
But I
have
think
the
that's
minutes?
a fair point from Martin. We're not really cited on what goes on in the tag.
No.
Sarah used to attend, Martin, so Sarah Faulkner would have been part of TAG.
Well, I've never seen any. I don't know what they do. I have no idea.
well, I mean, I've got no problem with, I don't see it's a problem to share the TAG minutes.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
It just might mean that we're halfway up to speed rather than not, if that's the case.
Yeah, I think it seems to me coming into this slightly fresh, although I've been in the tag for quite a long time, that perhaps it's not been as effective as it could be in how the tag and the board and different subgroups working on different subjects kind of all communicate together, and what the join up is between that and the action plans. I see the action plan should be driving the work of the tag, and the tag should be reporting on that to the board, especially where we've got a blocker to trying to fix a problem.
Yeah, and I was talking to someone earlier on having a water cooler moment. With the Zoom meetings, you don't get the water cooler moments where you can have a chat in the corridor. Whereas if we've got the details beforehand, we can have a water cooler moment on our own and come back with some answers rather than being a bit slow. If that makes sense, if that's positive.
We're also going to try and get down with technology a little bit more and make some sort of team on Teams where the tag can share different documents, and one of those is just got it on my other screen next to me. I'm working on a spreadsheet that's going to have all of the board meetings and tag meetings with the dates set out and an idea of what the agendas are, and it's got another tab that's got kind of actions that are falling out from each of the subgroups and the tag groups, and that will be going up on Teams hopefully when we get that working, so that if you kind of want to find out what in live time, real time, whatever it's called, what's been going on with a particular subject, it would be something you could turn to see when it was discussed and what the action is.
That sounds good to me.
Sounds good. Yeah, thanks, Haley. I mean, definitely we need to find a way that the board and the tag, that the board can properly monitor the tag and get a sense of the delivery of the plan, but not just a sort of general, are you delivering the plan, but specific items, because you can't go through the plan every board meeting. So that all sounds like a good way of starting to deal with that. Thank you. Mary, all right.
Hi, Hayley. I've got a few questions, which they're probably me being really stupid. You mentioned that you need the tag needs a 13 to a 20% reduction in agricultural phosphate to meet the favourable conditions test. But I don't know if there's a way of putting that into kilograms. Obviously, Welsh Water's betterment is put in at 56.2 kilograms per day, but obviously 13 to 20% is a little bit more abstract. And the reason for asking is because if we're going to have things like a water protection zone or whatever it might be, we don't want to overlay too many agricultural actions if they can capture it through one or another. So the 13 to 20% might need quantifying so that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. But you might already know what that is, I don't know. Can we retrospectively apply any savings to the catchment sensitive funding that's already gone into the catchment? Those actions, although they're listed as voluntary, they've been paid for and done and should be delivering a reduction. Is there any way that that can be captured into the tag so that you can see what farmers have already done and what money has already been spent to achieve that? Again, I know that the testing will show that there hasn't been necessarily an improvement, but it's important to recognise that's not because work hadn't been done or focus hadn't been put onto certain areas. And one final thing, I forget what page it's on, but I think it says that this phosphate action plan, in fact, it says that there's no adopted water management plan in the country that has been adopted to achieve favourable conditions. Is that still the case? And does the Dorset and Poole Basin Restoration Plan with quantified reductions through agriculture, does that have any relevance to what we're doing? Because that seemed to be a plan with numbers and certainty behind it. Do we need to borrow a few of their ideas to make sure that we've got numerical certainty through actions and we haven't kind of scattergun the actions in the hope that one would stick? Sorry, that's 3 questions, sorry, being cheeky.
Yeah, that's all right. I'll have a go. I was scrolling down the action plan on my other screen while you were talking. I think the first question was about turning things to kilograms. I don't have a problem in doing that. I'm not a maths person, so someone would have to help me with what to put there. In the lug section of the action plan, I think I'm in an old version of the action plan here, which doesn't help. There were some figures that tried to turn it in, the reductions needed into kilograms per day at some point, so I can check out where we've got to with those. At some point, the action plan is going to need a more fundamental rewrite. At the moment, I've got kind of a rolling copy of it where whenever anyone suggests anything new or any changes to put in there, I'm just using track changes and dropping them on there so that we can keep it all together. And that's one of the documents that I want to get onto our Teams kind of group so that it can be shared with everyone. But the way I see it working is that when we have the results of the target review, which I think is on the agenda later, and perhaps we start talking about condition assessment, that would be maybe a trigger for more of a fundamental review of the action plan. So a lot of the bigger kind of changes I'm kind of leaving until then. The last question was about whether any other plans around the country give enough certainty of achieving the target. As far as I know, there are none that do that, but I have, you may know more about the one you mentioned than me. So could you drop me an email with the name of it, which has promptly left my brain, please, and I'll go and speak to colleagues to find out what more they're up to then.
It's relatively new, I think it was 2 weeks ago, but it's the for Poole Harbour, part of Poole Harbour, and it basically says you must reduce nitrate and phosphate application by X amount over X amount of land and reduce livestock by X amount, but it's numerically attached to the reduction, so
yeah,
give you the certainty. And I think Natural England have endorsed it because it's come from them, so it might be one that we need just to kind of have a look at. How is it framed in terms of proving the certainty?
Yeah, the issue of certainty is still such a tricky subject. So the action plan is about river restoration. So it's trying to say, how can we get the phosphate levels down to the target? As a plan in its own right, it doesn't necessarily have to have certainty, and that's why it can include a lot of the actions around agriculture, which are essentially voluntary actions. So it's going to be difficult for them to ever have enough certainty.
Which is why
really the reason that we would like this plan to have certainty, if we can possibly get it there, is so that it can be relied on as strategic mitigation, which means that any plans or projects, including planning applications, that need a habitat regulations assessment could simply refer to this action plan and say it's all in hand, pass through the habitat regs and proceed in more of a business as usual way. So that's why we do still keep coming back to the certainty.
From what I know from Herefordshire's perspective, that's really important, because we're doing a core strategy review, and we can't do a core strategy without having a nutrient management plan with certainty. So they kind of all dovetail into each other. But the document I sent you about the catchment sensitive farming funding that's already gone in and been delivered, is there no way that those can be captured in terms of reductions, because they are certain because they've already happened?
I'm just thinking about whether, I think if stuff that's already happened needs to be captured in some way, definitely. It's whether that kind of, how we do that, and whether that changes where the baseline kind of level of phosphate.
Speaking as a taxpayer, money that I would want to know had gone to the purpose for which it was given. So if somebody's put a concrete yard down or put a shed up to cover manure stores, then they've had the money. The saving is relatively calculable, even if we do it retrospectively.
Yeah.
It was public purse money that went to do it. So
I do think there's a wider conversation that needs to go on about how we deal with this issue of catchment sensitive farming and agricultural actions and certainty in the action plan. And what the action plan we've got at the moment is very much a starting point. It gives us a framework so that we've got somewhere to start and direct our conversations and work.
Because again, if they don't deliver certainty or reductions, then we need to stop doing it. That's the other thing, is there's no point putting money into something that actually hasn't worked.
I wouldn't say it hasn't worked. The issue is you can't necessarily attribute, green kind of glowing certainty to it, because it's quantifying how much reduction it was. It's predicting future reductions, and then it's deciding whether you've got enough certainty that those reductions will stay in perpetuity. And that's what the issue is.
Yeah. So I know you and I have had lots of conversations about that. And at some point we do need Neutrality to give us a test that you can meet, because otherwise everybody thinks they're providing certainty, whether it be Martin putting a new shed up or me taking a farm out of production. We all think we're providing you the certainty, but we're never quite at the point where somebody says, right, list it, put the number in, tick it off, and it's done. Does that make sense? It just feels like we need to kind of pin down what that means and how we can deliver.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot more conversations that we need to have around certainty, and it's something that the TAG group needs to talk about.
Okay. Thanks, Hayley.
Thanks, Mary. Roger, I see you've got your hand up, but you're not a member of the board. I will exercise my chair's discretion and allow you a question, but generally non-board members don't get to ask questions.
Thank you for that. No, it was just really to pick up on Mary's point, although she made the point very clearly for me about the work that's been done already, and that we need to capture that, and so that we have that, because that also, I think, helps to take that particular sector in the future on the right note as well. And just while on that, really, is the concern also with regard to the past and current planning applications we have in the system, and the length of times that it's taken to clear the reviews by Natural England. I know you mentioned, Hayley, the issue of capacity within your own organisation. If you could address that as well, because it's causing a bit of pressure in our planning department in Herefordshire, and I am particularly worried the pressure that is coming on individual planning officers from applicants and agents, And so the sooner it's consultees both external and internal in the council as well. But I know that there are some that are waiting in your department as well. And if you, whatever you can do to do that, because that would ease the pressure, and I think again helps the tone and the mood for the background to all of this.
We're consulted by her, so it's quite a lengthy planning process, and one of the reasons is that we've asked not to be consulted on a planning application until the habitat regulations assessment is done. Once we're consulted on a habitat regulations assessment, we've then got a statutory response period of 28 days. And I don't know whether that's widely understood, because there've been a couple of emails this week chasing things that we don't consider to be late. So that might be something perhaps that I can talk to Liz or an alternative about if that's causing problems. Yeah. There've only been 2 cases, both of which were this week, where we've been chased for something. So if there's a difference of an opinion on that from the other side, it'd be good to know about that. That's the first I've heard.
I'll go back to DM and ecology and check for you and come back.
Thanks. So it sounds like a bit of comms around that would be helpful. Simon, go ahead up again.
Just to feed into the board, WAF do have data from both the Wye Herefordshire Improvement Project and also from the Go Wild in the Curl Project that show changes in sediment loading and trophic index, i.e. enrichment eutrophication, is proportional to the number of farmers acting responsibly and engaged within the catchment. This would potentially have been able to be used with certainty and to calculate certainty for changes. Unfortunately, the work of refocus and the issue of legacy phosphate and whether or not this is going to be released from our soils due to climate change has blown that out of the water. It doesn't mean that we don't have we don't have certainty of this, but we've just got to iron out this other issue, which is legacy phosphate accumulation, legacy phosphate, and that's where a lot of the action is going at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Simon. Councillor Phelps.
Maybe stating the obvious here, but I don't seem to see where is the performance report. I mean, I've got the action plan and I see there are actions on it. What I would like to see, I mean, maybe there isn't one as such, but I would like to see on a quarterly basis going through the actions, saying, did we do it? Didn't we do it? If we did do it, what happened? You know, that sort of thing. Yeah. Maybe I'm no,
I think that's absolutely fair comment.
There isn't one at the moment. That's what I described earlier, that I'm trying to get us to. Right.
I'm sort of relieved about that.
Trying to create something.
I missed the obvious, but
yeah, no, you need a sort of rag rated.
Chair, can I come in on that point?
You can, please do.
Yeah, we, at your request after the last board meeting, we have started to develop a tool. We're getting it onto an online platform so that all of TAG can contribute that. So I'm hopeful that by the time we get to the next board, you will have a RAG rated report and you can pick out by exception which actions that you would like to achieve. It's another thing that Herefordshire Council has taken on as a contribution to the board.
Thank you. That's absolutely fantastic. Brilliant.
So, Alyssa, sorry, would that mean we'll get a RAG rated report at the next quarterly meeting?
Yeah, that's what that sounds like to me. Yeah, we'll start to be able to kind of get, you know, easily see where the
just trying to help the note taker, really.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Phelps. Martin Williams.
Yeah, I'd like to if I'm unmute, yes I am. Agree with Roger with my farming head on, of course, that those numbers, I was trying to look for them actually while everyone was talking about a RAG, but there was somewhere written in the notes on the side about the actual reductions that have happened over the past however long, but I just can't find them. There's so many notes, I can't find them, but I think it would be really good if it is possible to put stuff in there, but I don't think it helps. I'll put that caveat on it because we're still in the position that we're in. So I don't think I would want to use it as a sort of a, well, we've done okay, because we haven't. And so I think that needs making clear.
Thanks, Mark. I mean, in the sense, there are two different issues here. One is the condition of the river, which is our main concern. The other is the requirement for certainty, which is to do with the Dutch case and planning. So they're sort of conjoined issues, if I can put it like that. So that, okay, no, that's all sounding very helpful. Rachel, you still have a hand up? Is that, are you going to come back in? No, okay, all right, legacy hands.
Sorry,
Right.
legacy hand.
That's okay. All right, so do we have any more on that? I just need a little sort of thing, with sort of not quite certain where to place this comment really, so I'm just going to make it, which is that sometimes there are projects that are looking to go ahead and are finding that it's difficult, and these are projects to do good, to help out, you know, but it's a little onerous in dealing with particularly Natural England and getting these things going. So I don't know if there's some way that we can shorthand or support or help those projects. I refer specifically in this instance to Heritage Wildlife Trust, Oak Tree Farm, the wetlands and scrapes and so forth going on there. That seems to be taking a lot longer than it really ought. And I'm not saying that any one particular body is being a problem, but that just generally, if we could have the attitude of, well, it's just going to do good, right, marvellous, how can we facilitate it? That would be a good way to sort of move those projects quickly through the process, both planning and you know, so forth, HRAs and whatever. If I can just sort of put that out there, it would be helpful. And also to Mary mentioned the pool and Dawson Pool Basin and the work that's been done there. And can the tag please look at that and talk to colleagues and see how what they're doing and how they're doing it differently, because they do have a far more kind of sort of focused, deliverable numbers, evidence. It would appear to be a sturdy piece of work and something that we should certainly reference and look at and see what we can take from and use rather than reinvent a wheel. If there's a perfectly good wheel somewhere, let's check that out. And I'm obliged to Andrew McRobb for posting questions to the members about that specifically, which feel free to answer at any point during the meeting. But basically it's that, you know, that's the concept, and why aren't we using that as a model? Okay, Martin.
Yeah, sorry, just on that planning point, I know there are cases around the county that have put in for muck stores with Natural England's willing behest, which have fallen foul of price increases and timing issues because of the planning situation between the two bodies. And that's really sad when we're trying to, you've got on the one hand, someone saying, yes, we want you to do this and we'll supply you with the money for it. And then the money being only 2/3 of what it was by the time the planning comes through. It seems there is this blocking business going on, and I don't know where that comes from, but it is hampering progress. And I don't know who needs to sort that out or who can sort it out, but please, can that be looked at?
Thanks, Martin. Mary?
Two things. I forgot what the first one was, but it'll come to me in a second. Oh yeah, no, I got it. Hayley, is there any virtue in having a set of tables for private delivery projects like the Wildlife Trust project or my one, or there's some others I know of people wanting to bring forward private delivery? Is it worth putting those into the tag as a kind of table?
I think so, yeah. One of the things that I mentioned last time was I feel like I almost need a wish list as well of what everyone would actually like to happen. So we're going to think some more about how to put those together, because, you know, sometimes you get someone, I don't know, someone will turn around and say, oh, what do we need to do here? And
yeah, I think that's a
we need those all together.
If you had a wish list, then I bet there'd be people out there who don't know where their money's best spent, but they would be looking at a list to say, I'll do that. I mean, that's effectively what I did, but I didn't have the list. But I thought, what do I need to do? You know, in desperation, when your back's against the corner, you will think, how do I get myself out of this? And that goes back to a point Martin just raised. I know it's ideal, Martin, if you can have grant funding for the sheds. But if that farm is causing pollution because of the way they're storing and producing manure, it can't just be reliant on the grant. They have to kind of change the mindset and say, how do I prevent that polluting the river catchment independently of a grant? So the grants are going to change and do all different things, but that doesn't mean that we can kind of assume that unless you get a grant, you can carry on putting the catchment at a risk.
But unless when you've got Natural England, you've applied for a grant and they've gone through their scrutinisation and they've granted you the grant, it seems pretty pathetic to me that you miss out on the wretched thing 2 years down the line because of other complications which should have been dealt with in the first application.
So I'm sure you'll understand if you're a builder and you had people who you quoted for 3 years ago for a house, the house they want to have now, you can't provide for them because of the costs. So we're all in that kind of inflationary issue. But if somebody's going to give you 2/3 of a building to reduce phosphate pollution, that's still brilliant, isn't it? So that would still be something that people should look at taking and kind of not just concede that the money didn't go as far as they were hoping to last year. Just from an outsider's point of view, that's how it'll play out, I think.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. Fergus, and then we're going to move on.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just first of all, we will continue to support the TAG group, and if we step up the frequency, we'll do our best to support that as well. There are TAG groups now setting up across all the nutrient management boards in Wales too that will be supporting. One thing I would just sort of raise, Hayley, in the letter from Natural England to local planning authorities on the 16th, in that, it's a long letter, there's a lot of really useful information in there. But one of the things it sets out is that it talks about an appropriate assessment. It says if you are carrying out an appropriate assessment, it must contain complete, precise, definitive findings which are capable of removing all reasonable scientific doubt as to the absence of adverse effects on the integrity of the site. It'd be really helpful, Hayley, if we could get some guidance on what constitutes that. I think that's, and I can understand that's not an easy thing to say, but that is key, because we can put in all kinds of measures, but what does it take to actually achieve that? Is it as it's set out in some of the other areas where they talk about combination of legal, technical and financial certainty? Is that what really constitutes certainty, that all three of those things come together? So anything you can advise on that and give that guidance, Hayley, would be really helpful. Thank you.
So that, can I check that's just to do nutrient neutrality, is it?
That one was about nutrient neutrality, but I think if we're making measures that are also designed to give certainty of improvement as well, I think that kind of guidance surrounding that would be very helpful too.
I don't know that you're going to get detailed guidance on what that constitutes in all honesty, because it strays into a legal matter, but my understanding is that it means around things like best available information on how much phosphate reduction you can expect and whether that's suitably rigorous and stands up to scrutiny, whether it can be shown that it's going to be for a suitable length of time. So for housing, that would be in perpetuity, which I think we've said is 80 to 120 years. Is there something that you feel you're missing in addition to that?
I've got the luxury of being able to sort of examine this and talk to other people about it. I'm thinking about other organisations that might like to get involved or actually contribute to improving the river who might not have that capacity. And it'd be really helpful if there was a sort of common set of understanding around that, Hayley.
I don't know if I'm just being a bit slow, but I'm not totally sure what I could provide to answer that question. Do you want to drop me an email about it?
Yeah, can I suggest that you take this out of the meeting, because it's really quite detailed, and maybe work at it on the tag as well. Maybe it may be something that you can do there and then bring back, if that's okay. Okay. Thanks. Right, so we're going to go into providing partners with an opportunity to update on progress of items specifically referenced in the plan. And I've got an update from Grace although she's, unable to attend because she's not well, but she's emailed. So her email, which I'll read out from the EA, we're on track for the number of visits across farms, anaerobic digestion plants and dairy farms. The trends we are picking up are compliance issues, lack of paperwork, lack of nutrient management plans, and low farmer awareness of the plans and what should be included. We continue to offer advice-led regulatory guidance and issue formal warning letters. Anecdotally, we're finding increased presence and taking a regulatory approach is having a positive impact, with an increased demand in support for nutrient management planning, EA inspections and NVZ compliance. Due to the dry weather we had over winter, we understand more farms have been able to establish cover crops. Projects, they continue to work with Herefordshire Council, WAF, Herefordshire Wildlife Trust, Wye Valley AONB to deliver natural flood management projects across the catchment, continuing to support citizen science work into the 22-23 financial year, working with WAF on the Elms Landscape Recovery application. The extra resource reported last time, which is 4 extra agricultural diffuse officers for the Wye, have become permanent due to more funding granted by DEFRA. This is positive and reassuring that with this permanent confirmed resource, we can continue to increase the number of farm visits and tackle the areas at highest risk. We are working with specialist teams across the EA to bid for more resources and funding for the Wye. This will include a range of skills from analysis, enforcement, and engagement. In the next couple of weeks, they're launching a website which explains the Environment Agency's actions to improve water quality, reduce excess nutrients, and help improve environments in the rivers Wye and Lug. It will share the EA's data analysis activities and plans. It will explain what they've done in the last 12 months, what they're planning to do, and will contain reports, data, and signposts to further information and partners' websites. They're doing it to improve transparency of data and plans, and it will evolve over time. One key thing which will immediately be on the webpage is the first of the quarterly data analysis reports for the River Wye. We've created this report to bring together the variety of data and information we have on water quality, so it contributes to a shared understanding amongst stakeholders. We're excited by this piece of work. The scale of the data being captured in the Wye catchment is increasing, with more continuous monitoring sondes, auto samplers, remote sensing, and citizen scientists being deployed, and we want to share the findings and analysis externally. For info, the 4 questions the report will address are: what are the main variables contributing to algal blooms in the Wye? What other ecological and water quality issues does the data show? When did these occur? Where did these occur? Which locations, sectors, and activities were responsible for the ecological and water quality issues identified in the data? What recommendations can be made for regulatory, partnership, and industry sector actions to prevent the recurrence of ecological and water quality issues identified in the data? It's a work in progress. It's positive to share our information and analysis publicly. We will keep improving the report over time. It's a positive first step. Held a positive, productive meeting with Minister Powell and senior leaders of the Environment Agency in February. The guests, Minister and senior EA leaders gained a greater understanding of the complexity and longevity of issues. Many thanks to everyone who was involved and made the visit useful. Since then, Minister Powell has continued conversations about the value of citizen science and improving enforcement. EA senior leaders are helping to initiate pilots and more investment in the Wye. WPZ. A WPZ remains one of the options available to us. In order to establish if it would be suitable, we are reviewing the effectiveness of our existing measures. The scope for this work is being drafted now. The scope will be shared with Herefordshire Council, Natural England, and NRW, so it's a partnership-led piece. Kingsland incident. Natural England and the Environment Agency announced in March we are beginning legal action against the landowner for damage to a protected area of the River Lug in Herefordshire. This follows a joint Natural England and Environment Agency in-depth investigation into ecological harm to the 1.5 kilometre of the protected stretch of the River Lug. This investigation followed reports of unauthorised activity, including dredging and changing the shape profiling of the riverbank in Kingsland in Herefordshire in December 2020 and December 2021. This has been a serious and complex investigation. The charges being brought against the landowner relates to unconsented operations and causing damage to a site of special scientific interest, carrying out activities within 8 metres of the River Lug, which were likely to cause damage or to endanger the stability of the river, causing a water discharge activity, namely a discharge of silt into the River Lug, failing to take reasonable precaution to prevent agricultural pollution from land management and cultivation practices on agricultural land, willfully disturbing spawn or spawning fish or any bed, bank or shallow on which any spawn or spawning fish may be, breach of a stock notice. Court action will now follow at Kidderminster Magistrates Court in May. Please note the charge failing to take reasonable precaution to prevent agricultural pollution from land management and cultivation practices on agricultural land relates to the farming rules for water regulations. Okay, I think we're gonna, I will put this in this entirety and it's in the minutes for everyone's records. So do we have any further updates from partners on the board for actions delivering the nutrient management plan? Joanna.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know whether there are hands on this Zoom, but I'm not very familiar with Zoom, so I just have to raise my hand. I just wanted to give, I've been talking about CSF a bit, but just wanted to give a bit of an update on CSF. We've now got 3 full-time CSF officers covering the catchment, and that's actually an increase of 2. So got 2 new people in post. Obviously, they're getting up to speed. And they are actually building relationships with those new EA regulation officers that we've been hearing about there. That's actually helping to get real join up with providing advice on environmental outcomes that can be achieved through CS and CSF whilst they're out on enforcement site visits. They provided 79 advice visits to farms during, that's specific farm and land management advice contract, which is slightly separate, but that's provided 79 advice visits to farms during the most recent contract from June to March within the catchment. We've got 32 live applications for CSF support and advice at the moment. And a bit more on the numbers. Applications approved by CSFOs in the catchment last financial year, I think, was 92. 175 applications, and then 39 of those rolled forward. So that just gives you an indication of a bit of the scale of the advice that's going on.
Thank you. Simon?
The monitoring in conjunction with the Environment Agency and also our direct monitoring up on the Itham system continues. So the Itham one was severely damaged by the flood in February 2022. We are in the process of rebuilding the structure at the moment. Also we've got a PhD that is now fully funded to work with, well, but basically what the Environment Agency are doing, and the 2 things will link together in terms of determining what is the cause of the algal bloom that's causing the problems and how we can solve it ecologically. The farm team continue. The main thrust of our activity at the moment is both maintenance of the existing change in the farming practices, delivering new solutions on the ground, trying to develop the solutions for phosphate stripping, phosphate export, and also we are working up natural capital markets and hope to have a trading scheme in place with certainty by September this year.
Thanks, Simon. Rachel?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Firstly, we were pleased to see that our phosphate calculator was adopted nationally and has been rolled out as part of the Natural England advice. The next offer we will have on the stocks is we will shortly be out to consultation on our agricultural supplementary planning document. This again will include a groundbreaking phosphate calculator for the farming sector. We're hoping that that will be adopted wider, but that will allow for the first time load to be calculated effectively on farms. So we will watch this space in terms of that. In terms of our integrated wetlands, which are also part of the action plan, we have purchased planning permission on our first wetland site at Luston. We have started construction works on that site. Today, we purchased our second wetland site at Titley, and we'll be moving through the planning, design and build stage. And we have a further site which we have agreed heads of terms on at Tarrington. This will ideally allow us to bring a report to the Council's Cabinet in April, subject to some further work on validation and interpreting the Natural England advice, which will allow us to trade phosphate credits for developers. We need to interpret the recent Natural England advice that came out in the last few days to tell us exactly how much headroom it will create for developers, but it will start to get building moving in the north of the county. And with some further work to do with Ricardo on validation and some further discussions we want to have with Natural England before we can confirm that it will come in April. But I'm confident that we will have very good news on a significant part. And one of the only certain items in the action plan will be being delivered shortly.
Thanks, Rachel. I'm just gonna take a slight moment here to simply make an observation. That is a fantastic amount of activity from one of our local authorities. I wait with bated breath for the report from the other local authorities, particularly upstream ones, as to what actions they're taking. Martin.
Thank you. Well, as you've heard with Grace's report, we had a meeting with the minister, which was great and lovely, and lots of people came and looked. It was disappointing. I felt the response from the EA in that they're, and reiterated by Grace, the advice-led approach, although item 6 on the agenda is an enforcement approach. Farmers have been asking for enforcement, which is really weird, Turkish photo for Christmas and all that sort of thing. But it seems a shame that we can't get more activity in that regard. Farm Herefordshire has now 2 new chair people. One is myself and one is Steve Clenk, with the hope that we can engage with more farmers through that unit and promote more discussion. There's a new facilitator who will be introduced to that business unit on Friday, and so we're hoping to make that grow. Kate, although Simon has skated over in his report, is putting together a landscape recovery scheme involving multiple farms, which needs to go in before the middle of May. I don't think we're going to get a response on that until probably the end of the year at the earliest, I would suggest. But all the signs are pointing towards that being accepted, because the main protagonists in that in the sorting of that organisation are all saying yes, which is very good. It would be interesting if the council had any of their land that they so wish to put into a landscape recovery. I know they are actually a landowner, and it would be encouraging for them to put their name to paper and do something along those lines if possible. The farming rules for water, there has been an announcement today by George Eustace regarding manure spreading again in the autumn, the details of which have yet to come out, but it is in place that there will be manure spread around, so don't get too excited when it happens. With the other current affairs in the world, to try and stop a farmer, I think you probably need a coach and horses at the moment to stop him spreading manure when George Eustace, our esteemed Secretary of State, is also promoting that. Within the catchment, I think there's a lot of manure being spread, poultry manure, for the nitrogen aspect of it, not necessarily the phosphate in the manure. It would be great if something does come along whereby there is an intervention in between those stages, that it was looked at favourably and exponentially by the council, rather than drag out, because it will take 12 months to get that in line. But yeah, all in all, there's lots going on, but it will be a collaborative effort to make things happen, and we have to get more engagement. Simple as that.
Thanks, Martin. Anne?
Thanks, Alyssa. Just by way of a sort of an update really on NRW's sort of work since the last board, and really in response to the comments that Hayley was making around the sort of commitments to the tag. So we're going to sort of bolster our involvement in that tag. And since that initial sort of tag meeting that Hayley has had, you know, we're going to actually commit another sort of full-time member onto that tag group, and also sort of release staff as required with specific specialisms if they're needed. So that was a useful conversation that we had with Hayley a few weeks ago. As far as the action plan goes, you know, again, in response to kind of, you know, a slightly sort of more focused view, the actions that NRW are committing to, we're working to add to those and build on them. I think, you know, there was probably a lot of work going on in Wales that were contributing towards that plan, which actually weren't featuring on that plan. So there's some work going on to include those that John Gilpin, I know John Gilpin will probably speak to you, Hayley, about that at the next meeting. As far as kind of work going on the ground locally, sort of boots on the ground, there's some good work being done again with Welsh Water on the storm overflow issue, and again, you know, we do have some of those still spilling assets on the Wye that are of concern. So there is some work progressing on trying to understand the cause and address those causes. As far as sort of the agricultural side goes, obviously avian flu, we've still got restrictions around visits to poultry units, but our focus therefore has been switched to the bed and breakfast pig sector. So we've carried out a number of visits on the Lug catchment to 12 bed and breakfast pig farms, and a number of those required some improvements around manure management. So that's some good progress on the Lug catchment. We've been engaging with farmers at livestock farms. We've had a number of high-level incidents on the Wye that we've responded to and have gathered evidence, and those investigations are ongoing, and they are, you know, sewage, silt, and spreading incidents. As far as the sort of the nationally driven work, and again, you know, we've got a number of failing sack rivers in Wales, and there is now a programme of work that's sort of focused on trying to address those failing sack rivers. We're getting some extra resources to do some further monitoring on the Wye. So we've purchased some additional sondes, and those sondes will be going in hopefully next month at key points on the Wye. We've commissioned some consultants to carry out some diatom and some invertebrate monitoring at a number of points on the Wye and its tributaries. And by number, it's probably around 100 key sites that we've identified. And this really is to help us understand how elevated phosphates might be impacting on the biology of the river. So it's all about building that evidence picture, which is going to help us sort of deal with the issues. We've appointed some consultants, so Arup have been appointed to progress the work in Wales on nutrient neutrality and nutrient calculators. So we've had an initial meeting with those consultants. It's a big piece of work. It's probably going to take a number of months. So I need to manage your expectations about how long that is going to take. But that work has now started, and resources have been committed to the consultants to actually do that piece of work for us. We've bought a number of handheld phosphate monitors that are going to be distributed out around the staff working in the patch to help with sort of routine pollution prevention work as well as incident response work. And we're in the process of recruiting an additional member of staff who will be our sort of Y SAC officer. So we've got a full-time post for the Welsh Y, which we are about to recruit into. That's probably it from me.
Thanks very much, Jane. Good stuff. Mary?
Let the other people carry on. Let you have questions for people as opposed to saying. I'm happy for
Okay. Fergus.
Thank you. Just a couple of points. One is it's a question for Rachel. It's great to hear that you've started breaking ground on the Luston site. We're doing the same on our contribution to that as well from the Luston Works, and we will do. Hopefully we will coordinate all that with you. But one thing we're just a little concerned about, the original intention with this was that the credits sold would not effectively consume all the benefit generated by the wetland, that there would be something in the form of additional benefit to the river provided. I was just wondering, is that still the intention?
Fergus, I can offer you complete assurance on that firstly, we are proposing to set aside 20% for what's called river betterment. The council still believes that the polluter should pay, whoever the polluter is, for actually cleaning up the river, but we want to create development headroom. That's what we're funded for from DLUHC. But we're also looking at and in discussions with Vivian about biodiversity net gain as well.
Thank you for that. The only other point I was just going to bring up was just to, if we're just giving very quick updates on what we've done, just to let you know that we provided our solution options and optimizer tools to Natural Resources Wales now for the Upper Y, so they're aware of what the options are, and we're in discussion with them about exactly which sites we will need to invest in. It shouldn't hopefully affect, so long as we get decisions soon, affect our decisions for investment on the Welsh part of the Y in this AMP, and all our investment and all the other works on the English Y are all progressing, the largest of which is obviously in Hereford itself on the main sewage works there. But there are quite a lot of implications for the investment period 2025 to 2030 that we're in discussion with NRW with them, and similarly with EA. So there's quite a lot happening with that, but hopefully won't stop what we are doing at the moment. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Fergus. Mary, do you want to come in now?
Thanks, Alyssa. It's more kind of a couple of observations, really. So both EA and NRW have both said that they've been inspecting sites, and I believe they've had money to do this and extra people provided to do it. But it just seems a bit odd that they're still offering guidance and advice when they found non-compliance events, and if there are incidents of pollution, it still seems to be that the result is more advice and guidance. And you've got Martin, and I've been to one of Martin's meetings, you've got other farmers who are saying they are not doing anything wrong, but they do want there to be some kind of comeback to the people that are. So if we've got the farming sector saying, let's look at enforcement and regulation, and you've got EA and NRW saying that there are incidences of non-compliance and pollution incidents, why are we not doing something else? That just seems like, try and come to every one of these meetings I try and come to with a kind of a low level of anger, but we can't keep going over the same stuff every time. So the meeting is a long meeting, but it's almost the same meeting we had 4 months ago. So if we've got farming rules for water, rather than us all asking for more regulations and burdening agriculture with extra layers of kind of regulation and everything else, why don't we just use the rules we have got and stop saying we're going to offer them advice and guidance and money? Let's do something. Doesn't seem very fair to farming, and definitely not fair to construction. My other point is the feedback me or somebody else?
Yeah, sorry. Can everyone mute?
Currently, you've got the catchment, and in the middle of the catchment is the lug. Now, the lug is under 3 years worth of punitive punishment, if you like, but the phosphate is coming into us and Powys are approving extra agricultural intensive livestock units, it comes into us. We then have to pay for a wetland, and Rachel has done extra special work to get this moving. And I am very grateful, Rachel, you know I am. But it just seems really perverse that we take all the extra phosphate coming in. We then, as a construction sector, are paying for all of the wetland, whether that be for river betterment or for the credits. And then the water's cleaned up a bit, we send it off below us and everybody can carry on building, but nobody's doing anything about the reasons we have the phosphate in the first place. So I understand the wetland's really important for kind of temporary position of neutrality or neutrality plus betterment, but it's an actual madness to rely on this in any shape or form for river restoration. So we need to do something to accept the catchment as a whole is in a dire situation, and we can't keep the lug trying to fix everything. It isn't, and it won't, and it will never do. So that's my plea to everybody, to really think about what's your contribution to the catchment problem, but also why is it fair that builders in the north of Herefordshire exclusively are paying and will continue to pay for the rest of you to carry on doing whatever you want? That is no longer tenable. And you've all got kind of various different legal threats coming in from all different angles. It's a wake-up call to say we can't keep going like this. Like I say, I always feel that I should try and represent people, not just myself, but other people, but the pain it is causing is no longer fair. I also wanted to just say that there are other people bringing forward private solutions, which again are being paid for by those private individuals with river restoration at the core of them. And we need to find a way to make those faster, because all of the other things everybody's talking about are long-term projects. We don't have long-term. Simon said the river had 2 years. That was 6 months ago. The construction industry has been without approvals for nearly 3 years. The planning department and Liz's ecology department, the pressure that everybody is under is immense. So these long-term solutions are fine, but you need something quicker. So let's find a way to let private people put their own money into delivering solutions so they can keep working. I think that's my rant over for now. I'll calm down and I'll come back in a minute.
Thanks, Mary. Yeah, I agree with everything that you've said, and I think there's an appetite. I mean, Martin said it earlier on, you know, we have got to start seeing some meaningful enforcement. We really do. Thank you.
It's not my job to look after the river, and although I feel it very strongly and I want to, and I'm really embarrassed that it's happened, because I literally live on the Arrow. It's not my job. In the room, in the virtual room we have, there are people whose job it was to look after the river or not pollute the river or put it right. It isn't my job, but I'm happy to pay to do it. But somebody needs to do something to help everybody else do it, because there is a point of resistance somewhere.
Thank you, Mary. Anne, do you want to come back in, or was that a legacy hand?
No, it was a new hand, and it was just really, you know, to try and respond to that initial point that Mary was making about, you know, saying you're both Environment Agency and NRW were going out and doing visits on farms, and where they were finding issues, they were issuing advice. I just wanted to try and sort of explain that, you know, very often these visits identify risks to the environment, not necessarily actual pollution taking place. And it's where those risks are identified that advice is issued to mitigate that risk and do something to prevent something from happening. You know, as environmental, sort of passionate environmentalists, you know, we always want to try and, you know, prevent pollution where we can, not wait for pollution to happen in order to take that or make that enforcement response. So it's really just, you know, if we go out to site and we see something happening, we will act. If we go out to site and see that there's a risk of something happening, we will issue advice and expect that advice to be heeded by the time we go back there to revisit. So that's kind of, you know, enforcement is always there as an option for us. It's not necessarily the first option. There are lots of tools in the box that and we will start, you know, with that advice and that preventative advice to you know, and again, it's all about trying to prevent something getting into the river rather than acting after something has got into the river. That was just really to respond to Mary.
Thanks, Anne.
Thank you. Rachel, is that a legacy hand? I think it might be.
Sorry,
Jim?
Chair, yes.
Okay, Jim.
Thank you, Alyssa. Going back to what Anne just said, do you not think, though, that by taking that enforcement action, that does actually prevent, that's preventative to others, that's preventative?
Yeah.
So there has to at some point be an acknowledgement that, unpleasant as it might be, and you might not want to do it, that enforcement action is preventative for the wider picture. So there has to come a point where we start talking about advice and being friendly and chummy. It's gone beyond that. Enforcement to happen.
Thanks, Jim. I think that point's been made. We're trying to just get updates here, otherwise we will start eddying around in circles as we discuss the frustration around this topic. Councillor Phelps, do you have an update?
Sorry, I just wanted to give my weight to what Mary was saying and Jim there. I mean, I was an environment officer in the agency 15 years ago doing this sort of work. We fully understand that the best way is to prevent pollution, but with all respect, as Jim, I think, says, a couple well-placed prosecutions can focus the mind.
Sometimes that's the best way to prevent.
And also, I know that the EA have just just some time ago announced they're only going to attend Cat 1 and Cat 2 incidents. A lot of this is diffuse and bad practice. You know, it's just really, as you said, Alyssa, you know, we need some meaningful enforcement. We need the soft touch as well, but it's that soft touch been going on for many years now. Yeah. And now we need more now. Thank you.
Is there an update from Powys County Council on actions being taken to deliver the nutrient management plan?
From my perspective, in terms of Powys, my effort really has been sort of at the Welsh level. It really has been. So it's more than just the why. We've got the US catchment as well that we're dealing with. And across Wales, there's quite a lot of activity. I'm still chairing All Wales Planning Subgroup, where we're looking at this, trying to bring planning authorities together. So some of the comments that we've just heard, I don't think are accurate. In terms of planning permissions, I'm not aware that anything's been granted in the Lug catchment at all when it comes to poultry units. So I'd be interested if somebody spots something, let me know. But everything, we're no different to all the other authorities in Wales and England that are subject to restrictions here with SAC catchments. Everything has to go through appropriate assessment. So that is happening. We've got housing developers across mid Wales that cannot get permission as well. So we've got sites in Prestine that aren't able to get permission. So the same restrictions and difficulties are faced by developers here. Across Wales, I think some of the things we're trying to influence and steer, it's not just myself, I'm trying to influence Welsh Government heavily here as well. We could do with an All Wales calculator. I think recently, a fortnight ago, we saw Natural England widen restrictions across other catchments across England with calculators. I think it would really help if we had an agreed calculator across Wales. There's also, NRW are also looking at wetlands as well at the moment and a regulatory position statement. So I think Herefordshire, you're ahead of us when it comes to wetlands. I think some of this will follow the work that Fergus has said. When we know where wastewater treatment works and stripping proposals are eventually planned, there will be settlements where that doesn't happen, and those have to be, in my mind, looked at as the opportunities for wetlands. So we will see whether that does bear fruit in time. Position statement from, and there will be a regulatory position statement. I don't know if that's been released yet. Anne may know, but it's another person in NLW that's working on that. Ruth Johnston, I believe it is. But that will set out a regulatory position statement about wetlands. I can see comments going up around what Powys is doing. We're working with at local level. I'm trying to help developers, help them through the process. It's not easy. There are betterment solutions out there that are possible. Our housing authority are having a look at this as well at the moment. What can they actually contribute? What could the housing authority do as well? So there's ongoing discussions there around what could happen at that level. I've probably missed 1,001 things that are going on in terms of Wales there, but there's a lot of activity. My focus, I have to admit, has been more strategic at the moment, trying to get this organised and sorted across Wales if we can, get Welsh Government on board, because I think we need to get the agricultural community fully involved here. And it's
is
not
that Peter? Sorry, is it you say you need to get Welsh Government on board? Are they not on board? Is there?
Well, they've set an oversight group up, which has really only just started ticking over. I would say it hasn't put its foot down and started running yet. So I think that's my perspective on it, or my take on it.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Peter. Okay, right. Any more updates from any board members of actions to deliver the plan? No. Okay, thank you. So next item on the agenda is response to Nutrient Management Board's request for water protection zone. I read Grace White's response, which is that they're considering it and looking at it and thinking about it. Do we have a response from Natural England on this, or Natural Resources Wales?
I can come in briefly.
Yeah.
I mean, this is. Sorry. Okay. This is.
If you could mute, because it's you that's causing the feedback. Sorry, Joanna.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, this is within England. This is EA's lead. So I'm glad that it's good to see that they're going to kick something off soon. I think basically within Natural England, we believe that we really need that this is last resort, and that it's not, DEFRA's not going to agree to it unless everything else has been tried first. And obviously we have the nutrient action plan going at the moment, and now that that's actually sort of really getting kicked off and some real sort of momentum and monitoring behind that, then at least that's the first step. So to us, I think it feels that the WPZ is a little way off, and that does have to be really tried and tested until we get to the end of the road on that. But obviously we wait EA steer and we'll have the partnership conversations with them.
Thanks, John. I always think of the WPZ, there's a bit like Game of Thrones. Winter is coming. So in other words, something's kind of, in the future. You don't wait till you get to it and then say, oh, blimey, winter's here. So it's a process. And so I think probably the board was hoping that the statutory agencies would start to move along that process. It's not a kind of a cliff edge. It's not a dropping off point. It's a process, maybe with a kind of a glide path, as they've done in the pool catchment. So rather than thinking of it as being suddenly on a Tuesday, we're going to have a WPZ, I think was the general gist. Yeah, sorry, Anne, have you got something to?
I think the first point is that, in Wales, it's the responsibility of the Welsh ministers in Wales, not for DEFRA. So, we have that devolved responsibility for the environment in Wales. So it would need to be Welsh ministers who would be responsible for designating any WPZs. And it is an option. And if we can, demonstrate through evidence that the mechanisms that we currently have are not going to achieve the required environmental standards, then yes, that is certainly something that we can look at. But at the moment, NRW is really focusing on identifying, the causes of the failure and trying to address these through the existing kind of tools and mechanisms that we've got. and through that process we can collect that evidence that we would need anyway if we were going to make a case to Welsh ministers. So it's almost like we do need to go through that process. We need to develop the case, and that case, you know, is about demonstrating that the current tools would, you know, are not currently sort of delivering what they should be delivering. So I can sort of, you know, provide you with that sort of in writing, if that would help for the minutes, just so that you can kind of, you know, make sure you've picked that up.
Thanks, Anne, that'd be really helpful. And I think actually the point that you're making around that some of the actions that you are undertaking anyway are also actions that would pave the way to a WPZ is exactly how to look at it. That in fact you can do all these things simultaneously. It's not you don't have to do it in turn. Councillor Phelps used to have, is that a legacy hand? I think it might be.
Yes, sorry. Could I just comment to say
yes,
that?
You can.
Yeah, I can see. I mean, the evidence base for it not working is that it's not working. You know, it's the evidence base is there. I don't know. I just want to know, how long do we wait for this evidence base to, you know, do we wait a year? Well, let's put a time limit on it. But I agree with you, Alyssa. We do need. It looks like we're going to have to get these WPZs in at some stage. Why don't we start preparing the ground? Because they're very. Unless all our actions start working overnight, we're going to have to bring them in anyway. And if they do work, then we could always not bring them in. You know, it's lots of prevarication, should I say, professional prevarication. You know, I know, and I do sort of get it, but I think we're going to have them anyway. So let's do it.
Thank you, Councillor Phelps. Thanks, Mary.
I thought that the board had voted and asked the agencies to progress the concept of a water protection zone anyway. So I don't know why we're talking about whether the past 5 years since 2014 hasn't worked and the evidence of it not working. Because if there isn't the evidence of it not working, then why am I in a moratorium? So I would agree with Mr. Phelps. Their evidence already shows that the previous actions, however they were worded, didn't work. The board asked the agencies to progress a water protection zone. Herefordshire Council voted unanimously to do the same and to pursue that through DEFRA. We can tailor the water protection zone to be conducive to a strong agricultural sector, so we could look at water buffers rather than blanket protections. But we need to do it. Otherwise, what was the point of the vote, which we all kind of struggled with last time? So I'm not very happy that the agencies haven't taken it further. The very least we could do is work out how much phosphate would we save if we had a blanket water protection zone and we had the length of the river and tributaries into buffers. That's a really easy mathematical thing to do. If that then showed that we would save more than we needed to, then we look at risk areas and you take it back from there. But the board voted and we should have that action being progressed.
Thank you, Mary. Jim?
Thank you. Just on that, I obviously detect the same reluctance from Natural England to progress the motion that was voted for on commencing the water protection zone. Just a question, does the board have the authority to do anything about that, or is it just a polite request that we voted for? Does that request have any weight or teeth, or is it just us expressing our view as a board? And if it doesn't have teeth or authority to make that happen, then what do we need to do to action that?
Yeah, no, I think we so Joanna.
So in England, EA are the lead for water protection zones, and I mean, yeah, Grace isn't here, but she has said that they're looking at it and will work in partnership with us. So yes, there hasn't been much progress within the last 3 months, but I think, I mean, EA are looking at it, clearly looking at it, and I mean, it's not for me to say what the board does or doesn't do, but it's not that it's not being progressed at all.
Thank you. Thanks, Joanna. Okay, well, hopefully we'll have an update next time on how that's progressing. Right, so going on to agenda item 4, new guidance on nutrient neutrality and NRW in development. So I guess that's something from NRW as well. So Joanna, I think you're leading on this.
Yes, I mean, that's been mentioned quite a few times already, so I imagine that lots of board members are fairly familiar with it, but I'll just sort of go back to the basics anyway. So, I mean, basically, neutrality is a known concept within this catchment, because the council, given the issues we've had, the council's been a forerunner in developing guidance in terms of the whole country and coming up with a calculator and through this interim delivery plan. And Natural England has also been drafting guidance nationally that has now been rolled out across the country earlier in March, a couple of weeks ago, and in fact did use the same consultants that Herefordshire used. So that's no surprise, but I'm relieved, I have to say, that the calculator is the same as the one for Herefordshire. The link that's in the agenda, there's national information in there, but we have also provided bespoke information issued to local authorities, which included a national methodology, catchment-specific calculator, and various other bits of supporting information, for example, around water quality and application to HRAs. Within Natural England, we are receiving requests for advice on nutrient neutrality, which we're determining how to respond to on a site-by-site basis. And I think that's pretty much where we are. And I don't know whether any more details needed, or yeah, that's kind of a summary.
Thanks, Joanna. Rachel?
Joanna, thank you. We're pleased to see that advice has been available, and we know that it's been difficult for you because of various court processes in other parts of the country, particularly Fareham, so we understand that. I think one of the areas that is unclear in the advice and is urgent for us, and we will be coming to you about, is the whole issue of phosphate strippers and their impact on phosphate calculations. It will make a massive difference to the number of homes we could release if we get a clear answer on that. So just to mention in advance that we will be coming to you on that particular question.
Thank you.
Mary?
I'll keep it quick. The neutrality test at the moment, I don't know if somebody, Rachel or Liz will know, but the number of people that can meet the neutrality test is so tiny that it's almost not really worth having. Also, the ability to demonstrate the neutrality test on private delivery proposals is really, really difficult. So you've got the position where small scale housing schemes are having to demonstrate that they've eliminated risk, perceived risk, potential risk, whatever you want to call it, and yet other application types don't have to do the same thing. So I appreciate you've got an agricultural SPD coming out, which has an agricultural calculator in it, but I just think that neutrality, trying to eliminate risk and apply to an area where that's virtually impossible to do, is costing us all thousands and thousands of pounds, but probably not getting anywhere near to the level of development you thought it might help release. It's really, really tricky to demonstrate neutrality. And also really tricky for people in Liz's team, for example, to have to assess this test of neutrality when it's quite a complicated document. So I understand why you want it to be complicated, because it needs to be the most rigorous test you could apply. But again, that almost becomes futile when you don't apply it to other developments in other areas. So it's kind of a pinch point in the lug, but it's not doing anything to save the river.
If I can just come back there very briefly. I think what I would like to see is developers coming forward for pre-app advice, and I think probably there's more scope to join up with Natural England on their discretionary advice service, so that we can engage developers and in order to try to get to that point of nutrient neutrality. But I agree with you, it is very difficult for developers to achieve.
Martin?
sorry to be a bore, but we do seem to be going round the houses and round the houses again. Mary made a point earlier, which is very valid, in that a lot of the damage is done before it even gets to us. We're going round and round in circles here, discussing what we're doing and what we're not doing. The gentleman from Powys said there was 1,001 things being done. I'm not quite so sure there's 1,001. There might be one, but I don't know what they are. But until that issue of the flow coming in from upstream is put to bed, I think we are going to go round and round the houses for the next 10 years. So as for I've made my point clear with you in an email about the water protection zone and the timings on the 2027 business, because I think it's A, unattainable, and B, folly to walk into a brick wall of unattainability rather than manage the situation ahead. That's where I am. And I think until something is done upstream, we are going to go around the houses. Simple as that.
Thanks, Martin. Yeah, so talking about upstream, and is NRW working on nutrient neutrality, developing something there as well, or have you got anything that you want to add?
Yeah, so we've engaged with some consultants now to start that process. I briefly sort of gave some information in my update. So we've got our on board. We've had an initial meeting, and there is that piece of work now starting on guidance for Welsh nutrient neutrality and nutrient calculators. But that we're probably some months off, if I'm completely honest, and we are, you know, a little bit behind, but the work has started, and we have to take that as positive.
When do you think that work's going to be complete, and when do you think that you'll have a base plan for Powys going forward?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm told that the hope is that they're looking at sort of August, September. That's what I'm hearing, but I don't want to be, you know, held to that, because this is these are conversations that I'm not party to. So I'm thinking probably 6 to 9 months, if I'm being really honest, Martin.
Okay, thank you.
Let me talk. And it might be sensible. I was just a thought really, since here in the board, and there are members who are already kind of quite well advanced with this, that we try to agree a position, or at least inform each other as to what steps are being taken on the English side for nutrient neutrality and what that looks like, and etc. And so that we have a kind of some sort of a parity on either side, at least, rather than involving completely separate schemes. If that's probably already underway, but it's just a.
It is. Conversations happen between NE and NRW around, you know, the approach that Natural England taken, similarly the approach that Carmarthenshire has taken, because Carmarthenshire has also developed its own nutrient calculator. So you know, we're not developing this in isolation. We are engaging with, you know, the others that are, you know, some way down the line.
Okay, Jim. Oh no, he's gone. Fergus.
So I think you just answered. It was about sharing information, so right. You've answered it, yeah.
Okay, thanks. Fergus?
Thank you. It's really a question for Anne. One of the important factors we're waiting for, as I understand it, is the review of permits or review of consents. Because once we have that, we'll establish which sewage works are protective and how we deal with, and I think it's an important element of allowing planning in those areas with headroom. Any idea on timing, Anne, on when that's likely to take place? Because that's critical for us, not only for now, but for our making sure that we incorporate any requirements into our AMP8 2025 to 2030 business planning investment.
I don't want to give you any sort of specific sort of timescales, Fergus, because it's, you know, it's been done by the Sac Rivers project. I know that work is underway, and it is, you know, making some progress. Can I take that away, Fergus, and see if I can sort of push for something, you know, that's a little bit, you know, firmer as far as that timescale goes?
Thank you. That'd be really helpful. And so the importance is, if we're going to have to, and we're almost certain, we certainly have to build investment plans into our next sort of 5, even 10-year plans, so that there's a sort of a steady stream of improvements coming along. It's really important that we get to know about them in the coming months. There's only a very limited window to build those into our AMP8 investment plans.
Thank you. Okay, right. Is that everyone okay with that one? Right. Okay, so we're going to move on then to agenda item number 5, which is target setting, Natural England. Joanna, again, over to you.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Claire's reported on this previously, and you know this has been ongoing for some time, joint work between ourselves and the EA to review the phosphate targets. This is to bring us in line with an RW approach, which was published, I think it was last year. Unfortunately, I was really hoping, we were really hoping that this information would be published by the time of this board meeting. But unfortunately, although the work is complete, we're not in a position to send it out. We have come to agreement on the phosphate targets of the EA, but additionally, we have been reviewing other data which indicates a decline in general habitat quality, and that coincides with that's reflected in the algal blooms, etc., and fish number declines, which I know are seen by stakeholders. The two bits of work are separate, but actually they do come together to some extent in considering the overall status of the river. I know it's really disappointing not to be able to give you the detail on the phosphate target, but what I can say about that is that the changes in limits will narrow the gap, but they do not cause the Y itself to exceed the phosphate targets. So broadly, in terms of status, then the river will remain the same as it stands in relation to the phosphate targets. Findings on work on the wider river condition are just emerging, and it does need more discussion with the EA. Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably all I can say. I'm a little bit wary of saying too much and misleading while that work is actually in progress. So I think that's probably as much as I can say at the moment.
Okay, thanks, Jan. I've got to say, I really struggle with this. I really honestly do. And I don't, you say they're separate, but they're sort of, you know, related. Well, yeah, I mean, so I don't get how we have a river that is not failing, according to NE, or is unfavorable recovering, when really it isn't. So this is what it just really does my head in, and whether or not we're talking about a target for water quality, which seems to me to be slightly kind of, you know, it could be here, could be there, a little bit, you know, 0.5 up, 0.5 down. It's what it looks like as a river, you know, and the loss of species that tells me that perhaps it's failing. So that's why I really just don't get it. Sorry. Rachel, do you want to come in?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I do want to press the point that you've just made, because the new guidance from Natural England talks about the need for an appropriate assessment in circumstances where things are unfavourable, but it now talks about an appropriate assessment where rivers are close to being unfavourable. Close to isn't defined in the new guidance, so I think we do need some clarity on this whole issue of targets and their impact. And I would broaden that out on Fergus's past point. The whole permit question and headroom has a significant impact on which sites we buy to deliver wetlands. And without clarity on that, we could potentially end up buying a site at risk or delivering a lower level of betterment than we expected. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Rachel. Good points. Mary?
Yeah, I completely agree with Rachel, because if you're planning to deliver betterment or improvement or whatever we want to call it, you need to know whose set of targets and rules you're working to. So we know the damage that was caused by the moratorium being kind of implemented without warning. And now I thought the point of the board being kind of quite inclusive was that we would plan our way out of this and how we prevent decline of the river or decline of the kind of economic structure of the counties. So I'm not sure, Joanna, why can't we know what the targets are, given that it's almost a year, I think, since we were told they were going to be a kind of a revisitation of the targets. I don't understand why the board can't be told what the targets are. If you know, then I'm wondering what the benefit would be, but also worrying about the harm that could be inadvertently caused by us not all knowing.
Because the phosphate, so the phosphate target, that's what's been worked on over the last year, but the work on the other aspects of the river, which is the broader condition, that's only just happening, and that hasn't been discussed with the EA, and that work could have the potential to change the status, the conservation status, and I don't know yet. So that's why I don't want to be saying.
Some of the projects coming forward though for betterment could in theory be layered to solve other condition problems, couldn't they? So if we don't know about the emerging problems, then Rachel hasn't got access to other funding streams, or the Wildlife Trust can't access other funding streams to cover other problems in the river. So I think, Alyssa's right, we know that there's a problem, but I don't understand why we're always kind of third hand placed to bring forward solutions. And then we have to kind of, it's like a reactionary thing. So we all know now that you're going to tell us that there are other failing criteria, which, don't need to be a scientist to work it out. But we need to know earlier rather than later, because otherwise we can't do anything about it.
Absolutely, and we will be telling you as soon as we possibly can. So, I mean, I'm hoping it won't be too long.
Simon.
So legacy hand, it was answered in the previous point when Joanna said that the rest of the SAC features assessment was still ongoing. I thought I wanted to know when the data for the assessment had happened, but I get that now. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Simon. Okay, right. I mean, I think that there's potential for as soon as possible, and then hopefully some of the board partners, we all want the same thing, so we can all help to deliver that as soon as we know what it is and where and how, which we look to statutory agencies to provide that information, and as transparent as possible, as early as possible. I think. Thank you. Liz Deeberly, Environmental Audit Committee, 4th report on rivers, the why specific issues. Liz.
Yep, I'll keep this brief because the report is attached to the agenda, but as you're aware, the Environmental Audit Committee issued their 4th report around water quality in January this year, and our environmental technician has summarised this report and highlighted the elements that relate to the River Wye, and that's the report that's attached. Essentially, I think the key point is it's been highlighted as a case study, as an example of a watercourse in a rural area and the particular issues that brings with it. So it obviously references diffuse pollution, small scale wastewater treatment works, and the lack of potential funding to invest into its infrastructure, limitations around the planning process, responding to agricultural applications, and also the legacy phosphorus and its potential for leaching into the watercourses. So the committee has put a number of recommendations forward, which the main point of which is that a catchment-wide approach is required, alongside further funding. And this will allow for better assessment of nutrient flows across the watercourse and to develop a focused catchment sensitive farming programme, which the evidence collated as part of the assessment could be used to inform planning decisions and cumulative effects. And my understanding is that to date, there hasn't been a formal response from the government. So that's currently overdue. In the meantime, obviously, we are within Heritage Council progressing our own measures independently in terms of developing the agricultural SPD, which is due out for public consultation in April, as one example. But I understand the board might wish to write to DEFRA to seek an update on the government's response and potentially set out its support for the catchment-wide approach, and to request being at the forefront of developing new initiatives to address the pollution as a result in rural areas. I hope that's not too much of a whiz through for you, Councillor Swinglehurst.
That's fine. Thanks. As you said, the report was attached to the agenda, and I think it had all the points in it. Fergus.
Sorry. Yes, thank you. Liz, that was it. The report is really good, very comprehensive, makes very hard reading, especially somebody working for a water company. A couple of points from me is I did, the point in the report there about having the idea of a catchment budget, a nutrient budget, I think is going to be a very important concept and one that we're going to have to work within, because that's the way to actually manage this in the long run. Very complicated, but I think it is the way forward. Can I just query the point about the report referencing lack of investment in small sewage works? When I read through the report, there was references to contributions from people who gave evidence to the report saying that, but I didn't see that in any of the conclusions of the report. Our process is very simple. We look at our full contribution, how much phosphorus are we putting in? What's that proportion of the load? How much and where is the best place to take that load out? And ideally to take that out as high up the river as we can, so we can improve as much of the river length as possible. That's really the approach. That's what we do when we go through all this modeling. That's what it's all about. It's only one part of the assessment process, Liz. So if we need to invest in small works, or if we need to invest with others to do that, we will do. But right now we're focusing on the biggest places where we can take phosphorus out for the greatest length of the river.
Yeah, understood. We will amend the wording on that then for you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Phelps.
Yeah, I want to thank Liz for that. Sounds great. I just want to clarify, Liz, did you suggest that the government need to be pressed for a response to the audit committee? Because I guess they haven't yet. Is that the case? And you suggested maybe this board might write to the government pressing for that? Sorry if you didn't say that, but I'm just trying to clarify.
Yeah, my understanding is that the response is now overdue from the government to the committee's recommendations. So yes, the board may wish to write to DEFRA to ask for a response to come forward.
Well, that's a fine recommendation. I would thoroughly back, or I'll propose it if you're not on the board. But
yeah.
I think
fine. I'm happy with that. Has anyone got a problem with writing to the government asking them to respond? No?
Copy to Philip Dunn as well.
Pop that on the to-do list, and yeah, CC Philip Dunn. Thank you. I had just something that kind of came out of this, and in fact, it's kind of it's popped in. It pops out in a couple of places really, but it was in this report that the NFU and Welsh NFU. I've heard interviews, so I know this is not just the English NFU, that they're not accepting the source apportionment and the causal link to poultry. And so I was wondering, Martin, what evidence is the NFU relying on in their, where's their version of a source? So what's their evidence for this? And if it's not an evidence-based position, how can we address it and do something to reassure them or clarify the position? Why do they have this problem?
Having not been briefed by NFU, I'm going to speak as a farmer and not as an NFU person. I would suggest that that's come from the legacy phosphate issue and what is coming from where. There's an element of farmyard, there's an element of AD, there's an element of poultry. It's difficult to distinguish between the four, I would suggest. And that's me speaking as a farmer, not without any background
I think
knowledge.
that's fair enough. But
So
I think
the apportionment towards poultry has been picked on as an easy target, low hanging fruit, and yes, it is, and easy to look at. But I think from a base farming point of view, there's more than one source of phosphate in agriculture, and there's more than one, just as there is outside. Just as there is.
Yeah, I get that, Martin. I think the issue is between agriculture and everything else, rather than within the agricultural.
I'm sorry, I've not
area,
had any.
But that's fine. I see Sarah's going to pop in and help us out.
Yeah, that's fine.
Sarah.
Yeah, hiya. I think the issue that we've got is that we had the agreed source apportionment, which we've all been working to, and then more recently we've had the change talked about, haven't we? Where and I haven't got the figures quite in front of me, but we've got a quite significant shift in the proportion that's apportioned to agriculture. And I think my understanding of that is because we've got obviously the very welcome investment that's come online from Welsh Water, which changes their contribution, but their contribution, that's changing over their AMP period, isn't it? But what the modelling has done, the modelling has looked at what their contribution is going to be once all that investment comes online, and has changed it now. And I think what the issue we have is that we don't see this uptick in the proportion that's coming from agriculture actually reflected in the data on the river. And my understanding is that the contribution of phosphate from the agricultural sector has actually been on a long-term decline since the 1990s. And I think the conversation that we're having about the source apportionment at the moment gives people, the general public in particular, the impression that phosphate losses are increasing from agriculture. And I don't think that actually is accurate, and that reflects where we are. So that's our issue. We'd also like to understand more about the assumptions about agricultural land management that have gone into the model that has been used, so the SAGIS model, and also the data that's gone into SAGIS. So yeah, we are just generally uneasy about it, and whether it really does truly affect what's going on in the ground, and the big efforts that we know that farmers are making out there. It's a tricky issue, isn't it? Because it's a model, and there's all sorts of assumptions, and there's all sorts of double counting in there. And but that's not to say, and I'm going to put this, I want you to put this on the record actually, that we keep hearing this, that the NFU are saying that the agriculture doesn't have isn't taking responsibility for agriculture's contribution. That's absolutely not the case. And we know that our farmers, need to take measures to try to reduce their phosphate losses. And we've started a project at the moment to look at, what our farmers are doing. So I really want to make that clear, that we're not at all saying this is not an agricultural issue, but sometimes, the debate that goes out there into the public can give people the impression that our contributions are increasing, and I don't think that's accurate or fair on the sector.
Thanks, Sarah. That's really, really helpful. Fergus.
I think it's worth just explaining a bit about the modelling very quickly. The SAGIS modelling starts off with trying to calibrate what's there here and now, what is actually there today. And then what we do is we run options to say, what if we were to make improvements here or make improvements there? Always focused on our works at the moment. We're looking at, as I said, made the offer to work with Avara last time, but we look at what would happen if we made improvements in various places, various sewage works. What would the impact of that be? And that's looking at the future. So we end up with a picture of the present and the future. Overall, looking at the sort of figures that are coming out, the contribution in the upper Y still looks roughly the same in apportionment as it did before. Whether that's what we're just looking at now is the total contribution or the total load in the upper Y. I'd be really interested, Sarah, if you have evidence and data about long-term phosphorus levels in the river and phosphorus loadings in the river. That would be really interesting. We've got some evidence and some data, but it's really quite limited at the moment. So if you have anything, that'd be really helpful.
Thanks. So yeah, I feel that there would be quite a constructive engagement just between you two over this and trying to understand get this kind of clear between the sectors, if that's possible. So are you willing to do that? Is that okay? Fab. Do you need to come back in? Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, as an organisation, clearly we don't have data. We're a membership organisation. Our members are, they're all individual businesses across the landscape. So we don't have data on what they're doing. And that is one of the big problems with this whole debate, isn't it? That, we don't have that kind of data gathering capacity. What we know is that the kind of global trends in terms of how much nutrient is being used within the sector. So that's what we have. And that doesn't quite match up with, with the narrative. But yeah, if Fergus and I can have a sit down and a session to have a look at it, that'd be brilliant. Thank you.
I think that'd be great. And I think the problem with using, and I understand what you're saying, but the problem with global trends is that where you've got, for instance, particular intensification of a specific livestock, which is very phosphate rich manure in a very small area, that it's not going to be reflected in global trends because it's, as it were, a hotspot. It's a concentration and in a natural way at a particular place, and I'm not sure how, but I think it'd be great if you two could mine that out together. It'd be awesome. Martin, do you come?
Yeah, sorry, just following on from that, really. I think the Lancaster work will highlight possibly the apportionment, as has been highlighted, has been put in the chat.
Yeah.
There is apportionment on styles of manure. Yes, I don't think it's going to make agriculture look any better in the light when it comes to light.
But I think it's important that we arrive at a point where everyone agrees.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. But apportionment to me, from my other work, is irrelevant. We're not doing the best we can, and we need to be doing the best we can in agriculture.
That's exactly the right attitude, Martin. Good for you. So yeah, thanks, Simon.
I've got can I just put it on record on the board that we do need to be careful about the terminology we're using. We're bandying around phosphorus and phosphate, and they are fundamentally different things. Total phosphorus, if we talk about, yes, I agree, there has been a reduction in the use of phosphate and the use of nitrogen in the agricultural community. We've seen it in our monitoring, although if legacy phosphorus comes out of the soils, it will come out mostly as PO4, which is phosphate, which will lead to an increase in that. Manures, for example, poultry manure, has 25 kilos of phosphorus in it, but only 2.5 kilos of that is as phosphate. The rest of it is in other forms of phosphorus. Those other forms of phosphorus are available to nature through the enzyme phytase, particularly the organic components. So it is when people talk about this being a simple problem to solve, it's not. It's a fiendishly difficult problem to solve. And we can't solve it unless we understand what we're actually dealing with. Sorry, on record. Thank you.
Thanks, Simon. I guess that's part of the reason for the DNA project. Right, okay. I think we're done with that conversation now, so thank you all very much for that. And moving on to the Y Catchment Phosphate Commission. Rachel.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is a proposal which we have been calling on the Herefordshire side for an independent review since November of last year. And this is a proposal to take forward a semi-independent review. I think listening to the debate again this afternoon, I'm hearing a certain amount of stuckness. There are some challenges about the links between strategy, local delivery, and a lot of our stuff is stuck in operational silos in respective organisations. That's borne out in, can we get a glide path to a WPZ, which sits across two nations, has various different impacts in various different organisations. We've had the question of certainty come up. We have a planning system that sits within Natural England, within local authorities, within local planning authorities, where there is an interface between planning policy, national regulation, and local policy. There is an enforcement interface. That enforcement interface is borne out by national regulation, enforcement policy within different siloed organisations. For example, the Environment Agency, for example, local authorities, the planning department, the environmental health enforcement that takes place. We have the downstream consequential impact of decisions taken further up the catchment. And we heard Fergus talking about his strategy to solve that on the water side. We have significant cross-border challenges in terms of regulation and oversight. We have differences of agreement, probably less important, about the number of chickens or source apportionment data. And I've heard various different frustrations this afternoon about how we move forward. And I think that's not because we haven't got able people around the table. We've got an excellent chair, we've got bright people around the table, but there are issues here that I do not think that the TAG group has the capability or the capacity to solve, because they sit at various different levels. Some of them strategic, some of them at the operational level, and some of them at the legislative level. And that's why we're proposing a phosphate commission. We would like that commission to be a joint commission between England and Wales. We don't want it to be the English telling the Welsh what to do in any sense. There is an open invitation to Powys to participate in that. There is an open invitation for other organisations and other partners to come and work with us on that. I hear the passion around the table. I see the intellectual capacity around the table, but there are some intractable problems here that we need to solve. Could it be solved through the board? It's been working for how many years now as a board? And the same old issues are here. We are proposing to bring industry experts. So I am talking to a former board member of Ofwat to help us on the water and the regulatory side. I'm talking to leading farmers nationally. I'm talking to Welsh and English experts to see if they can actually help work with us. So the proposal is in there. There are some challenges. Would it duplicate the board? I'm proposing not. I'm proposing a review of the evidence base, a call for evidence from various different organisations. I'm proposing that we then commission expert support to work with an expert panel in the open, in public, to refresh the plan, which Chair of TAG this afternoon accepted is needed, has come up in judicial review pre-action protocols as accepted as needed. We are offering to help see if we can actually move this forward, develop a stronger plan, and then bring this back to the board with a resourced, focused, publicly consulted plan to help the board in its important work. In the meantime, Herefordshire Council wants to be very, very clear that it will continue to use all of its best efforts to support the work of this board in delivering the current action plan. I'll stop at that point. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Rachel. Martin, you've got a hand up. Is that legacy hand, actual hand?
It was a legacy. It was a legacy hand. Sorry,
oh, okay.
It was a legacy hand. Sorry.
So, Rachel, just a couple of things for me. Is the board in the papers? It sort of refers to it as a sort of task and finish. So it's a time limited. So the commission is a time limited exercise.
Absolutely, a time limited exercise.
Right.
Picking up what is broken, getting some expert support to fix it, and then handing it back when it's mended.
I like the sound of that. Fergus.
Thank you very much. I read through the paper, very interesting. A couple of comments from me. One is I was really unclear, and I think it is something that any commission would need to be very clear about, on how the commission will assist the board. It feels to me like this is the place where we can actually make a difference. You've already got the main parties here, and what we need to do is make this board work well. And one of the biggest issues is about developing the cross-border sort of coordination and liaison that we need. I'd also just sort of query, I'm not sure who you're talking to, who is ex-Ofwat, but Ofwat's role is as an economic regulator. The expertise you need is not necessarily in that area. It's the expertise in how we will actually make the difference. Once we agree what the improvement plan is, we then go to Ofwat and we get approval for that. That's really NRW and EA that we agree that with. It's not Ofwat don't really tend to get involved in that part of the process. My final concern was in the drivers for the board. The drivers of the board are very interesting, but they have none of the drivers actually refer to agriculture, except only one, I think, indirectly. One of them actually refers specifically to reducing the contribution from the water industry. It quotes 24%. So, 76% of the phosphorus contributions coming from other sources, but doesn't really seem to be a concrete plan to sort of reduce that contribution. Our contribution is slightly higher than that, by the way, but just those that was a concern really in the way the drivers were set out, Rachel.
Thank you. This is a scoping paper. I'm happy to listen to all contributions that could help make it better. So I'll take those comments on board, Fergus, and thank you for them.
Mary?
I was going to say pretty much what Fergus mentioned, just picking up a few points about who are the right people to have on the board, on the commission, and making sure that the delivery targets tie into what we need them to do. But I can understand why the commission would work, and I think it being a time-dependent body sounds like a good idea, Rachel, because time in these kind of arenas just drifts by like you wouldn't believe. So deadlines and times are always great. Having the right people is crucial. I think you already kind of know that, but we probably need somebody scientific based. I've kind of mentioned a few names that might be useful, but I think from my point of view, the gap we have collectively is that we don't have somebody tapping in the numbers, coming out with the reports, scouting all the academic papers that are coming in left, right and centre. So that would be good. And I just wondered if you knew, I know the £100,000 funding is relatively new, so it's probably not something you have a handle on yet, but do you know what other people are spending their money on? Is there something that we're kind of missing that might be a quicker point of restoration demonstration?
Mary, thank you. I take your points on science. I think it's important to bring the science in there, particularly around the soil and agricultural side. And I've had a number of conversations with Martin on that, and I will continue to pick up that particular area. On the £100,000, you'll be pleased to know that 2 weeks ago, we got wind that the grant was about to be requested. We had 3 days to put a bid together, which we did and successfully submitted. However, I want to make very, very clear that it is a DLUHC grant to support work to get development moving. I think government is still looking for other players and other departments and other branches across government to continue to support the wider work on river restoration.
That's a really good point, Rachel, because I wanted to make that later on. So the 100,000 is coming for to release your development sector. Your development sector are paying for other reduction measures, whether it be wetlands or through the Welsh Water. And I think that kind of gets overlooked, but also Herefordshire were given £1 million from the LEP in order to facilitate and support the development sector. And yet we're the sector that are still kind of trapped. So we probably need to be really sharply focused on the fact that housing is funding almost everything that's happening. or could do as well. So that was a good point. Thanks for reminding me.
Simon.
Rachel, I support this idea of bringing expertise into the process and understanding. I would ask that you bring a freshwater ecologist into this as well. The rationale behind that is that the reason why we are in this situation is because we have got a failing SAC, and it's the features of the SAC that are failing, and it's failing due to eutrophication. The proxy for this is phosphorus, but phosphorus is not the only thing, as I said in my previous rant, phosphorus is not the only thing driving eutrophication. There are other things in it. And the worst possible scenario here is that we put in a huge amount of effort, bring our rivers back to 0.03 milligrams per litre of soluble reactive phosphorus, and we've still got an SAC in dire trouble. So I think bringing that into the board and the freshwater ecologist into the board is quite important. Thank you.
Thanks, Simon. Councillor Phelps.
I would support this. I have to admit and apologise, I couldn't read the phosphate briefing paper, but I mean, at the risk of making complicated things even more complicated, I like the idea of a task and finish with a finite end date. But I would also like to say that it's not just the science, we need that, but it's also the politics. We're in this place because of the politics of it, the politics of allowing almost laissez-faire of development that planners couldn't really control and can't really control now. So politics, I know it's an ugly word, but that's why we are where we are. If it wasn't down to politics, our planners or your planners or whoever planners upstream would have actually said, hey, Houston, we have a problem here. We can't allow this. But there was nothing really they could do as far as I can understand. So yeah, go for it. Can't do any harm. It can only help. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm sorry about the paper. By the time we get to the next meeting with Michael Carr being on board, we're hoping to have this on the council's committee platform. So people will be able to sign up for e-alerts for the committee. The papers will be more easily available, and I'm hoping that that will make it a smoother and better experience for people.
Woo, that was fabulous. I'm just going to pick up something in the chat from Helen Hamilton. Should the commission be focused on phosphates alone? Shouldn't it look at the wider problem of the ecological failure of the Y and identifying the reasons for failure, which is sort of a little bit, so I think probably just saying also what Simon was saying, not to be too narrow in focus on this. My other concern would be whether or not you get that engagement from the other side of the border, because just again it feels like all the creativity and energy is coming from this side. So early engagement and signs of enthusiasm from the Welsh side, I think would be necessary for it to work.
We've had preliminary discussions at a joint cabinet meeting with Powys a few weeks ago, and I will continue to follow that up with officers at Powys, and I believe the leader will also be in contact, the leader of Powys Council.
Okay, good. Jim?
Yeah, I fully support the proposal. I would just echo what's slightly been referred to already about the scientific element. I think it's really crucial that this piece of work is seen to have real scientific rigor and authority, and that the data can be, or the findings of the report can be relied upon and trusted by all members of this board, because without that, I think it risks being, it's not going to achieve what it sets out to achieve. I think it's really crucial that almost the level of scientific rigor is beyond reproach, both from the construction sector and the agricultural sector and everybody else in between, so that we can all have real trust in the data and the conclusions that are drawn. I think from there, that's the platform we've probably been looking for the past 3 years to build on and move forward.
Okay, thanks. Phil?
Thanks. I think Jim's just actually said probably what I was going to say. I think we talked earlier about having task and finish groups for the tags to be very focused on specific issues and things. And that, to me, this is almost a super task and finish group to focus on the action plan and that we've got. and actually get that rigor and agreement cross-border and everything to get a much more focused, agreed plan that is beyond reproach, as Jim says, that then comes back to the board, that the tag and its action plan and its task and finish groups can start delivering those actions, and you start getting the performance monitoring and everything like that. So I think it's a really good idea to try and pull it all together and get some of those thorny issues that have perhaps been dogging us for a few years out of the way, to get that cross-border and agreement across the board or what's needed.
Thank you. Thanks, Phil. And then Martin's going to have the last say here because minding the time. Martin.
Yeah. One, I think without cross-border, I don't think it's worth the paper it's written on. And so would there, Rachel, be a caveat that the cross-border has to be a prerequisite for the commission to happen? Otherwise, we're talking amongst ourselves yet again, which seems absolutely pointless. And secondly, what do you see the timescale of? Would you see this running to 2027? Would you see it running until Christmas Eve, or would you see it running until 2032?
I think there's two timescales, Martin. Firstly, I would agree with you. Without the Welsh, we're not going to solve the problems in the catchment because it's upstream. Without finding a way to work together, we're not going to solve the problems in the catchment. We've been here too long. In terms of timescales, I think I would like a guiding coalition together. I'd like a little bit more shaping. And with the board's support, I would like to, between now and the next board meeting, continue to work and engage with those that it's necessary to engage, and come back for a further discussion at the next board meeting. I think once we are through that process, we can then have a much clearer timeline. I wouldn't like it to go more than 12 months in terms of a piece of work. Others are telling me that it might take longer than that, depending on the level of research and public engagement necessary. But I think that once we get the guiding coalition to take this forward, then it can be done within a year. But it very much is a pick up what's broken, work intensively to mend it, and then hand it back to this board.
Okay,
I think what I would suggest then is any board members who've got any further suggestions or things that they might want to put before Rachel for the commission in terms of membership or whatever, please to communicate that.
I'm happy to meet with anyone who wants to discuss this, Chair.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. I think there's broad support, Rachel.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So next thing we have is actions taken between meetings. Jenny Gamble.
Yeah, this was about, I think we've covered some of it earlier on actually, about poultry numbers in the catchment. We've got a figure of just under 17 million birds in that would be Herefordshire that are permitted at the moment. However, that isn't necessarily the actual number because some sites won't be operating to their full capacity. So that number is the total permitted, but that's not to say that is at any time the actual number of birds. Also, we do get variations coming in for permits to be varied, normally to increase numbers. So at any time, we can receive a variation application, to deal with. So that number will change, as and when people want to apply to change their permit. And I think it was mentioned earlier on, it doesn't include anything under 40,000 birds. So, and some people do have a premises that they keep to under 40,000 because then there's no need for a permit. So I think there is a bit of information on that we can probably get, but we don't have, we don't have the full picture. So I don't know whether the board wanted to, make some kind of request for the DEFRA data, or for, because that data does exist, because I know, you know, you fill in, you know, people fill in a inventory form every year. So although that changes anyway, so you'd get the data for the previous year and then it would probably be out of date anyway. But it's not as easy as, you know, and I know, you know, it was mentioned earlier on that a difference of, you know, 500,000 birds is, you know, is a fair difference. And, you know, but I mean, we do know the rough, you know, we've got an idea that it's just under 17 million birds at the moment. But as I said, you know, that does change, and that's not, you know, if they're not all running or some of them aren't running to full capacity, then it is probably less than that at the moment. But as far as permitted sites go now, it wouldn't be more than that because that's what's permitted. So
yeah, but there's very much kind of a plus or minus in that, isn't there, really?
There is, and I'm not sure, you know, I know it's really important to know, you know, as accurate figures as there can be, but I think at some stage, you know, it might be useful to work on the figures that, the best figures that we can get, you know, resource wise, rather than continually chasing
the
more
last
figures.
chicken. No, I think we're still trying to get to within 1 million. that's not
well,
but if, you know, if the data's out there in the form of the annual inventory, even if it's a snapshot, you know, we should go for it. We should ask for it. We asked for the APHA figures. I don't know if we've received them yet. I haven't seen them. You know, and so I agree with you. We don't want to expend vast amounts of energy chasing down the last chicken, but or pig or whatever. But get as close as we possibly can. Am I right in saying we haven't had a response from APHA? Rachel, she's still on the call? No? Okay, I'm guessing not. Mary?
I think if we can get somewhere close to what's permitted, that's as good as guess as we're ever going to have. And then we'll roughly know who's had a permission for an unpermitted unit. But if we're going to ask for data, then probably Herefordshire Council needs to ask for the data, as well as the Nutrient Management Board and Powys if they want to do their own thing. But we need to make it for all animals, not just chickens, because as Martin said, you know, dividing it down into chickens doesn't seem quite fair when
no, absolutely. And that's the advantage of the annual inventory is everything. So
exactly. So why don't we get all of it, and then we need to share that information, because I can't tell you the number of meetings I have been to with that famous slide with the animals printed, and the numbers are wrong, but people are making quite big decisions based on the numbers that are going out. So let's get somewhere close that's cautious and accurate, get it for all animals, and then make sure everybody has access to that information so that we're not kind of going backwards all the time.
Yeah, we don't want to be talking about this if in months' time, really. Okay, thank you. Items for escalation to statutory partners. This is a new item on the agenda. To ensure all issues and risks identified in the meeting are correctly captured and moved to a risk and issues log. That sounds like it might possibly be a RAG-rated type thing. Oh, joy. And we've got planning approvals, HRA, and downstream impact on anaerobic digestion facilitates and field spreading. Rachel, what
Chair, yeah, that's come up a couple of times this afternoon, hasn't it? We notice, and this is one of those intractable problems about permitting, isn't it? That you have a permitted AD facility. The planning process points to there's a permit there, there's enforcement there. We're actually looking at the side of a ship without a guardrail. We know that enforcement is not working, is not effective in all cases. If the same level of certainty that is applied to the development sector, improving its cases to build new houses, was applied rigorously through the supply chain from a new poultry unit or an increased size poultry unit through an AD facility, are the controls there in that AD facility to prevent it either being accidentally or intentionally spread beyond where we think it might be spread and therefore impacting the lug catchment? I think it's a significant certainty question. It has downstream impact It's one of those on the intractable lists, and I think it's one where we need to come out of our silos as planners, as regulatory agencies, enforcement agencies, and actually come to a sensible conclusion on downstream impact, because I think we're all getting different independent QC advice and legal advice on the same issues depending on where we sit.
Fabulous. Completely agree with you. Big subject for right now, which I'm not going to suggest that we talk about right now, but I am going to suggest, I'm going to ask that we get full engagement from planners and regulators around this issue so that we have an agreed position on certainty over such circumstances. So I'll take that as a yes unless I hear a no, because I think it's really important that we get that. That's a really good description. Side of a ship without a guardrail. Really good. Thank you. Thank you for that, Rachel. That's very helpful. Okay, so item 10, Kingsland incident. I gave that update as part of Grace's written update, which will be appended to the notes of this meeting. And finally, public questions. Now is your time to ask a question, members of the public. Anyone's got a question that they would like to ask? Mary, you've got your hand up. You're not a member of the public.
I know, can I say that I've got a public question, but I'll let everybody else go first, but I have got a question that isn't.
But so far, I don't have any hands up.
Okay. Shall I ask it and then you can go to everybody else if they think of one?
Yeah.
It's for Fergus, really. In the government information that came out on this around the 16th, on one of the case studies they suggested we all look at for Somerset, it mentioned in there that small schemes should have already be covered under the upgrades to sewage treatment works and the headroom within them. So a long time ago, probably 2.5 years ago, I was told this by somebody in Wiltshire, that if a sewage treatment work had capacity and headroom, then it would, the numbers for the housing were already counted. And then I've obviously been trying to poke around at that and see whether that's the case. But then when I saw it on the Somerset slides, it kind of reminded me that we could all be looking at changing the position quite significantly if small scale schemes are already counted in your proposals and your funding up to 2025. And I really do need an answer, because obviously if Somerset are working on the premise that they're all covered, I think Wiltshire are doing the same. It would be good to know whether we've all been kind of spending loads of money on things that we might not need to.
Chair, would it be okay if I share one slide just to answer that question? I think I can answer it reasonably quickly.
I'm terribly impressed that you can even do that.
Okay. It's one we prepared for something else.
It's a slide I just haven't done.
Here's one I prepared earlier. Can you see that?
You look at this.
We agreed with the NRW that both wells scheme there was worth doing to enable development. Even, you know, it's obvious we will need to do an improvement of both wells, and we can do something there without any hesitation. There's no doubt we'll need to do something there. So what we looked at, we did our modeling, and that says 5 milligram per litre would be a fair share. That would be meeting our contribution. But if we took that down, and you need to remember that it's both the flow, the DWF stands for dry weather flow, and the concentration limit, is the two of those things that contribute to the load. If we have the phosphorus coming out of that work, so that would be a potential new permit level, we would get down, we would go from 8.1 kilograms a day down to 4.05 kilograms a day coming in. The planned development that's currently in their LDP and the development that's planning there will increase that flow. So at the same concentration, the amount of phosphorus per day goes up to 4.8. That's the excess that would still be there. So it's one of the questions. There was a meeting about a month or so back with both the NRW and Powers to actually look at how this might work and whether this could satisfy the need to provide neutrality in this particular instance. And that's been taken away by NRW to consider that in the review of legal advice, because the question is really one of Mary, I'm sorry, but this isn't a direct answer to you. The question is really one of saying, if we improve to 4.05 kilograms a day from that site, are we deteriorating if that then increases in the future to 4.8? Or is there still a benefit of an extra 3.25 kilograms a day that could be used elsewhere for the downstream? So that's the question that NRW are considering as part of the kind of question that they're considering in their approach to nutrient neutrality. And it's a complex question, this one, because superimposed on this is also Welsh legislation in the form of the Wales Environment Act and the Wellbeing of Future Generation and other acts as well. So it's not just the same question that Natural England will necessarily have had to consider. I don't know if that's any help, but this is just a sort of an illustration. In fact, what it shows is that we would still be at nutrient, if you like, our fair share on that works in theory, until you could double the population feeding into that sewage works. And obviously there's no such consideration. So the point we're making is this particular case, we're really quite happy to go beyond the fair share and deliver what we'd hope would be a sort of a reasonable contribution as part of our overall improvement to the river in this case. Thank you.
I suppose my question was, Fergus, when Ofwat sign off the money you can spend in the various AMPs, I've been told that they gave you that money based on the projected growth. For example, Herefordshire gave you within their core strategy. So you were given the money because of the expected growth. So you're spending that money, but you haven't had the growth. So all of us that are kind of stuck in the moratorium, the money you have invested was because of those houses coming forward and they haven't. So we're in the realms of double counting. If you
no, that's not quite right. I was trying to do a drawing of this before the meeting. Unfortunately, I didn't have time. There are two elements to the improvement that we have to make. One is, if there was no growth, how much improvement should we make anyway? And that's one thing that we're funded for. The second thing that we do is we then say, well, what will happen when that growth turns up? And once that growth turns up, will we still be doing as much as we should? So there's those two elements that drive in, and those two contribute to the scheme that we will deliver in any individual site. It's not just one or the other. Does that help, Mary?
Yeah, so that means you're kind of working on the 88,000 houses in Herefordshire already, plus the 500 a year that you might get.
Plus the growth, and we do that over quite a sort of a time scale of 10, 15, 20 years, usually whatever's in the local development plan.
Yeah, understood. Thank you, Fergus.
Okay.
Thanks, Fergus. Thanks, Mary. Oh, good. Thank you. Right, I'm going to persist now with members of the public question. So, Martin, you're going to have to wait because you're not a member of the public, member of the board. Christine Hugh-Jones.
Hello. We've heard about anaerobic digesters, and we hear a lot about NRW permits. As I understand it, an NRW permit for a poultry unit applies to the installation, which is a fairly tight boundary around the building and the hard standing and so on. And I don't think many of us really understand what the NRW permits control. And I wonder if somebody could come along and talk to us about NRW permitting and anaerobic digester facilities and intensive livestock units, because, there's a big mystery in all our minds about what regulation there is over where manure goes and where digestate goes. And this is obviously fundamental to protection of the Wye.
Anne, sounds like something for you.
So, Christina, so you broke up in the middle of that for me because my internet connection is a bit ropey at the moment. So, was your request then to invite NRW to come to meet CPRW to explain how permitting regimes work, how the conditions are, environmentally protective within the footprint of an environmental permit? Is that what you were requesting?
Well, you could meet CPRW, but I mean, I'm talking here from the point of view of the whole catchment and the people at this meeting. And of course, we could ask the same question of the EA, because I wonder if everybody understands exactly what EA permits, which after all are under the same legislation, do actually control.
I think it would probably, be fairly straightforward to pull together, some slides and some information and run through that at maybe a future board meeting, if that's any help.
Yeah.
Thanks. Provide information separately.
Yeah, or maybe just a kind of a brief outline in a paper, and then maybe we'll get a briefing during a board meeting at some point when we've got some wriggle room on an agenda. But if you can just do a briefing, that would be awesome. Thank you, and also ditto to EA for still on the call, Jenny.
Thanks.
Thanks, Christine. Andrew McRobb. Andrew.
Hi, thanks, Alyssa.
Okay.
As you're aware, I submitted 3 questions prior to the meeting, which much of them was covered. But I have to say I'm somewhat dismayed that the EA aren't up to speed with, and Natural England, with what's happening in Dorset, because there's a judicial order there, or a justice order, and there are fantastic plans that actually are quantifiable both in what they're doing and within timeframes. And I would have thought that should have happened a long time ago in the wide catchment. As an example, the EA have a target to reduce orthophosphate from 51 tonnes to 22 tonnes per annum. Now that sounds quite reasonable, yet we're spreading 3,000 tonnes on our land in Herefordshire in excess of that the land can use. So I'm really concerned that is there joined up thinking across the EA, or are they simply acting in silos? I'd also like to congratulate Joy, because that is the most fantastic piece of sentence idea that I've ever heard in the Nutrient Management Board. And I think that it really hits the nail on the head. Let's actually have a task and finish group, and let's have real information, and let's address all the elephants in the room. I can't say how pleased I was to hear her say that. I think as a member of the public with a vested interest in this on CPRE's behalf, what I've listened to today is so many people talking about process and very few people talking about results. And at the end of the day, we're talking about the health of the river. And I would just like to say to everyone, you may have your processes within your organisations, great, but stand up, be counted, give timeframes, and let's all aggressively attack this problem. Let's not just sit on our hands at our desk and keep our head down. I think there needs to be much more vigour in this whole thing, so that we actually ensure that we don't end up with a dying river. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Is anyone still on the call from the EA? And how cited are you on the Poole and Dorset work? And do you talk to your colleagues down there?
Yeah, I'm still on the call, Alyssa. There have been national meetings, EA on the EA side of things, and some of the national colleagues are dealing with the issues down there as well. So people are cited on what is going on in other areas of the country. So I'm West Midlands based, but a lot of people, head office people, obviously they're national. So there is sight of what's going on in other areas.
Are you able to talk to your colleagues in Poole and Dorset?
Yeah, because the people that I'm dealing with over a lot of these issues, they're also dealing with my equivalents down there. So yeah, we are cited on what's going on in different places. Okay. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Good. Hayley, do you want to come in?
It's the same situation here. We've got a couple of national specialists working on this issue, and then area teams sort of squirreling away like myself and colleagues are on the why. So we have national calls almost on a weekly basis to talk about nutrient neutrality. And we do learn from each other. What I haven't done is sat down and looked at their plan, looked at what they've actually put in there, looked to see whether it's delivering certainty, which is, I think, the reason we mentioned this plan in the first place was a question from Mary on whether it has certainty in it or not. That's what I didn't know the answer to. I think it might be, you know, if we do go down this phosphate commission approach, or learn some lessons from that idea and see if we can spruce up what we've already got.
It'd probably be worth
Then
looking at it, wouldn't it?
we do need to learn from things that are going on elsewhere around the country.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I think it comes back to what I tried to highlight when I was saying my tag update at the beginning, which is the issue of resources, because I am a bit concerned that, say, if we have a phosphate commission, or say if we, whatever, it's going to be the same people doing the work, and we do feel thin on the ground. It is hard to get your head around everything that's going on and hold it all in one place. And there are not many of us working on this.
Yeah, thanks, Hayley. Thanks for your honesty there.
Alyssa, may I just come back on that one point, because this is at the heart of it. We can't have organisations such as the EA saying, well, we'd like to do it, but we haven't got the resources. If you haven't got the resources, bang the table. Tell us, we'll write to the MPs, we'll lobby for you, because we can't accept there aren't the resources. We have to do something about the pollution. And it's a simple case of actually not sitting on your hands and not saying, well, you know, it's going to take another 5 years. The river doesn't have 5 years. We have
I think that, yeah, I very much agree, and that is starting to happen. I think that's how we've got more resource for the catchment sensitive farming work, and the Environment Agency have just had a whole new team join, which Jenny will know more about than me. And it comes down to, again, what we were saying about the tag at the start of the meeting, coming to the board more often with what our barriers are, what needs to happen, so that the board can be effective in going to DEFRA or DELUC, whatever they stand for, to ask for what we need.
Absolutely right.
And we can help in that. We lobby Parliament all the time. So you know, we can help if we know what the objective is.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I think identifying, as Hayley says, the identifying obstacles, whether it's the Natural England or Environment Agency or NRW or whatever, you know, the board is here to help you, help us, help the river. Thank you. Thank you. That's all very good. Okay, so James Marsden, I have to ask, why are you called Greg's Pit? Is this because that's sausage rolls, or?
No, that's my IT incompetence, inability to change the name. Greg's Pit is the name of my property, but it's also the name of a perry pear. We have an indigenous perry pear in the orchards here, from which I make perry, but I'll stop at the advertisement there. I'm going to speak as a member of the public, but for the time being, I'm still a member of the Brecon Beacons National Park Authority, but I do not represent the authority any longer on this board for reasons that Alyssa is aware, but I don't need to discuss today. My questions are for Rachel, really, if she's still with us, and if not, for Alyssa to consider taking forward. My experience over the last 6 years in the National Park Authority has been that I don't feel you're going to make an immediate progress talking to local elected politicians that side of the border in the Y and the US catchments. We have to do it. We have to continue to do it. Keep trying, but you're not going to make much progress. The target you need to aim for is Welsh Government. And I think that David Hitchener, the leader, Alyssa and Rachel need to take the Phosphate Commission idea into a meeting with Julie James and Leslie Griffiths. And I think you should also seek, either together with them, meetings with Gianmarco Corrado and his deputy, Carrie Witchard, who head up the land reform, landscape and conservation officials within Welsh Government. Why do I suggest that? Because at the moment, that team is finalising the detail of the Sustainable Farming Initiative, the equivalent to ELMS in Wales. Now is the moment, because, and Anne, please come back to me if you disagree, if Alyssa allows, NRW doesn't have the necessary tools to do what needs to be done in Wales. The control of water pollution regs don't exist in their full form until January 2023. There's a regulatory gap. NRW doesn't have the resource, doesn't have the boots on the ground, and the National Park Authority doesn't have the tools or the resources either. So there is a gaping hole for this sort of initiative, and I think that initiative needs to come with some engagement from this side of the border, the English side. And I should also say, with Martin in the room, that Martin's discussions that I've had with him one-to-one, but also listening to him in the board today, it's a breath of fresh air by comparison to what I hear from FUW and NFU Cymru. If only one was hearing similar kind of engagement from your colleagues, Martin, the other side. So I don't have answers, but I urge the board to engage over and above the local elected politicians in Wales. Got to go higher up. Got to do it soon.
Thanks, James. I think we are and do. It's over my pay grade there. Rachel?
I welcome those comments. I welcome any comments that actually help move this agenda forward. We will continue to engage with Powys. I think it's important we do, because of the central role that they have in this. I would be happy to take advice from Anne on how to engage with Welsh Government, given the impetus. I think that's probably something that needs to be done away from this forum. But I am willing to listen to those suggestions seriously, given the support from so many partners around the table today, which I take note of, about a desire to move this forward in a proactive way.
Thanks, Rachel. Thanks, James. Really helpful. Okay, so now I've got three board member hands up. We've got 3 minutes left of the meeting, so you'll have to be brief. Martin was first.
Thank you, James, for your kind comments. My last few questions are heading Welsh way. What are the blockages to the movement in Powys from NRW, from the council and from government? What can we do to expedite some movement? Thirdly, what level of P in the river are Powys happy to see come over the border into England? Have they got a target for what comes across into us? Because we are bearing the brunt, as we've heard all afternoon. If you have a target, can you please share it with us, someone from Powys? And what are the aims of Powys to get that number achieved? When can we see something from Powys to give an aim, a target and a date? Because we're working very hard this side of the border, and it would be lovely if it was happening the other side, or seemed to be. Is there anyone from Powys still here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Peter Morris is still here.
Peter Morris. I think target-wise, I need NRW to answer the targets, because the targets in terms of phosphate are set by, my understanding is by the JNCC for the river. So it's those targets. We're in a position no different to you in Herefordshire on the Lug catchment, where anything that adds phosphate to the river is unacceptable. Okay, so it's very simplistic from a planning perspective. We can't permit something unless it can be mitigated. Okay, and we need to have that with certainty. No different to what's happening in the Lug catchment and now lots of other catchments across England. And it's the same in all 9 Welsh Riversack catchments. Okay, so that's the position that we're in. In terms of trying to find solutions, I went through it earlier. I think there's certainly work happening, or I'm trying to influence things at a national level. So this discussion we've just had around Welsh Government being involved, I think the idea of a commission, I'm very supportive of. I think it would make progress and help focus and maybe put us back on course. So I'm very supportive of that. I think I can certainly speak to Rachel around who I think needs to be involved in that, because I sit on the Welsh Government Oversight Group. Okay, and it's got their water division people, and we are beginning to see the agricultural department within Welsh Government now come into that as well. Martin, I probably missed something of what you've said, so come back to me if you want to, because I probably haven't answered everything that you asked me there. Yeah.
Well, there was. What are the blockages?
Are the blockages in planning?
Movement.
In planning, or
in every regard, really. I mean, we can't just blame it on planning. What are the blockages on the ground? The Wynhalog site has just been agreed. Has that got mitigation around it? I don't know. I'm not aware of that, but it's been quite a headline. In fact,
yeah, you've seen the headline. We've received. I'm not going to say too much because I can't, but we have received the beginnings of a judicial review in relation to that. So we're seeing a challenge to that permission, and we will see where that goes. And that does link into some of the discussion we had earlier around those downstream impacts. So the waste is all due to be handled by an anaerobic digester. Okay, so we will see, and I will come back and I'll report on what happens with that in due course. But that's probably as much as I can say in this forum.
Thanks, Peter. I think it's impossible for Peter Morris to really comprehensively field questions of that nature. To be fair to Peter, who's always the person present at the board. I'm grateful to him for his presence.
It would be nice to have in the next meeting perhaps some of the answers towards that, though, rather than us go around the houses, because we're going around the houses all the time.
Peter, if you can sort of, bank them, maybe take back to your colleagues, maybe your elected colleagues. Do we have any elected members from Powys on the call?
We haven't. I haven't worked out, put my hand up. I was going to raise this earlier. We've got local government elections coming in Wales, so we will see new members coming through, and that will be an issue for us. I haven't mentioned it, but there's also been a scrutiny review commenced in Powys. So we've got an enthusiastic member. It's only just beginning that, who's interested. Now we'll have to wait and see if that member's still there. Yeah, we will have to wait and see whether that member's still there after the elections. But all authorities across Wales are going to have a new membership come, what is it, May the 5th. The election.
I mean, it's just observable, I think there are 4 Herefordshire Council members on the call, currently, including cabinet members. Only saying, as they say. Fergus.
Sorry, thank you. Just want to put on record that we have concerns about the commission, and it's primarily about understanding its role. And even today, I hear 2 very different kinds of description of what the commission will be. One is one to sort of have a high level political clout to engage with Welsh Government, and there's some really good stuff around that potentially. The other is one of a scientific research about getting really into the data and understanding of what the issues are in the river in the wider sense. I really worry that the idea of one body trying to do both and trying to do that in a reasonable timescale of a task and finish group. We've got a number of things. We're going to put them in writing and send them through to you, Rachel. So you've got those. Some of the things I mentioned earlier. So thank you for that.
That'd be super helpful if you could do that. Thank you very much. Okay, so thank you everyone. We're only 3 minutes over for us. I think this is some kind of a record. So next meeting, 29th of June, and I'm going to close this meeting. You can please stop the recording.
Thank you, Alyssa.